President
of the Russian Federation, Vladimir Putin. President of multinational state of Bolivia, Luis Alberto Arce Catacora. President of Zimbabwe, Emerson Mnangagwa. Moderator of the plenary session, Sergei Karagano. Good afternoon, friends. Distinguished presidents, colleagues, dear friends, I have the great honor and I have the tremendous pleasure to moderate this session. This will be an interesting session. We have a very interesting group of speakers. Please allow me to start with President Mnangagwa. He's a legendary person, the last leader of the African country who fought throughout his whole life with weapons, with arms in his hands, for the independence of his motherland. He spent 10 years in one jail, 2 years in another jail. He survived that. Had 2 death sentences, but when he became the president, he repealed the death penalty in his country. We'll be very interested in President Mnangagwa's account of his experience that he can share. The country is under sanctions and has been under sanctions for many years because they managed to nationalize the assets of white colonizers. President Luis Arce, an outstanding economist, descendant of people who fought together with great Simon Bolivar for the independence of his motherland, a little less dramatic destiny, still an impressive and full of victories. Besides, for many years, for 15 years, he was a Minister of Economy and Finance of the country. Throughout these years, his country has increased its GNP by 3.5 times and decreased the number of poor people by 2.5 times. He conducted wonderful reforms, very interesting reforms, including nationalization of assets of foreign companies and minerals. He was very successful in import substitution. We'll be very interested in learning about his experience as well. I think that President Putin requires no PR. I'm a citizen of the state. That he's the president of. So it will be possibly inadequate to praise him, but I remember in 1998, 1999, when our country was on the brink, or possibly beyond the brink of collapse. It was a very tragic situation. And I remember when we fought an almost hopeless fight. At a certain point in time, God decided to pity us, to take pity on us. But now, I think President Putin, you have an even more difficult task, not only to be victorious, but also to save the world that is falling to the brink of the global war. But maybe let's speak about something else right now. President Putin, you have the floor. Good afternoon, friends, colleagues. President Arce, President Mnangagwa, Dear guests, friends, ladies and gentlemen, I'm very happy to welcome all of you to the 27th St. Petersburg International Economic Forum. This year, more than 12,000 guests and participants have come here out of more than 100 countries of the world. These are shareholders and CEOs of major companies, well-established experts and analysts, political and community leaders and statesmen. As per tradition, the forum in St. Petersburg gives an opportunity not only to build business ties, agree on cooperation, or launch a promising project, but also to have an open discussion and exchange opinions about the relevant trends on global and regional markets. To take a look through the prism of economic relations at the processes that are rapidly unfolding in the modern world. We see that a race has started between the countries to strengthen their sovereignty, to strengthen it in three key areas: state, cultural values, and economy. At the same time, the countries that used to be leaders of global development, even recently, trying by hook or by crook to maintain their slipping role of hegemony. There is nothing unusual about it in general when a country or a person are trying to maintain their position or to strengthen them, but doing that by hook or by crook, or doing that by wrong, not by right. That's not the right way to do it. And we can see that already now the economy number one is China, with a big gap with economy number two. India is economy number three in the world and a global leader on growth rate. Ever more vocal are the countries of South Asia and Africa, with high birth rate and still low level of urbanization, as well as high catching-up growth of the economy. According to experts and dedicated specialists, it is these states that would define the global economic landscape already by 2050. I can add that right now there is an explosive technological growth in the world in almost all spheres of life. It has a serious impact on management and production processes, and even whole industries. It is apparent that using the technological progress and its benefits to the fullest can be done by those countries that not only produce new solutions, but also are capable of ensuring their fast and accelerated integration. Russia has proven the high level of being prepared and receptive to technological changes. We already see the changes in our financial sector, electronic trade, transportation services, system of state governance. Similar processes are already unfolding in the armed forces, where we need the high rate of technological updating just as well. This is a crucial and defining matter for our country. I'm sure that in the modern conditions and in the long-term outlook, the role, the power, and I'll say even more, the future of the states will depend on how effectively they can find responses to global challenges, tap into their domestic potential, to use their competitive advantages and offset their weaknesses, maintain and strengthen partnership relations with other countries and regions. In February this year, during the address to the Federal Assembly, I outlined key avenues and priorities for Russian development. We formulated a comprehensive reform program to the end of this decade and beyond. The format of the forum allows to highlight the economic agenda of our development. Those qualitative and structural changes that are happening in our country and that we intend to offer support, active and targeted support to rally around them financial, human and organizational resources, both at the federal and regional and municipal levels, to implement national projects that we have discussed in detail at the recent Council for Strategic Development. What are these changes? What am I talking about? Number one, considering the international nature of our gathering, I'll start with foreign policy. With foreign economic policy, the positions that we intend to take on global markets, the way we intend to change the structure of our export and import. Despite all challenges and illegitimate sanctions, Russia remains one of the key participants of of global trade, actively developing logistics, geography of cooperation. We're strengthening our relations with Asian countries. The growth stands at 60% since 2020 till 2023, with Middle East 100% growth, Africa 69%, and Latin America 42%. I assume that my distinguished colleagues and guests of our forum, President of Bolivia and Zimbabwe, will touch upon this topic in their interventions. In general, it is these countries friendly to Russia, and we should pay attention to the most are the fastest growing countries, and we should pay attention to those economies. They will define the future of the global economy, and they already make up 3/4 of our trade volume. We continue to yield high results in our work through Eurasian Economic Union, ensuring the balance of interests of all participants. Last year, total GDP of the Eurasian Economic Union has increased by 3.8%, and mutual trade by 4.7%. And the structure of the trade has also improved qualitatively, meaning an increase in supply of manufactured high-tech products. It is such non-commodity, non-energy export from Russia that we'll support very actively. By 2030, such volume should increase by no less than 2/3 compared to 2023. At the same time, we're not talking about simply increasing export in tons, cubic meters, units of goods, but we're talking about products of goods with high added value, not only about Russian companies entering new global markets, expansion of geography of cooperation. All that is important, but not sufficient today. We're prepared to offer other countries comprehensive technological and industrial partnerships, including full cycle of goods and services, training national talent, localizing production, engineering support, technical maintenance, insurance, and so on and so forth. Such an approach to cooperation as an equal to equal, transfer of technologies and competences, and not their monopolization, allow us to build more resilient ties between the states. They increase the robustness of positions of our companies in the global market. They give an opportunity to work with foreign partners, playing the long game. It is precisely the way, with a long outlook, looking into the future. That's the way one of our leading companies, that is the Rosatom company, are working. A leader in global nuclear construction. It is apparent that entering new markets requires strengthening of transportation ties. As for the eastern direction to China, Asia-Pacific region, the main project for us is the development of the so-called Western Railroad polygon. In April, we have established the parameters of yet another, the third stage of its updating. By 2030, the transportation capacity of the Eastern Railroad polygon must increase by up to 210 million tons, and by 2030, up to 270 million tons. Special attention will dedicate to the southern direction. We have already adopted the plans for international corridor north-south development, as well as a corridor to Azov and Black Sea. The Northern Sea route is becoming a relevant global artery. Yet last year, 36 million tons of cargo was transported through it, and in the future, the volume might exceed 150 million tons. For that, we'll continue to develop infrastructure of the Northern Sea route, build transportation entry points to the Arctic ports. A special role in this work is dedicated to the leaders of our northern regions. To that end, we'll establish within the State Council a commission for the development of the Arctic regions and the Northern Sea route. In general, it is forecast that by 2030, the volume of transportation through international transportation corridors through the Russian territory will increase by 50% compared to 2021. First and foremost, through increasing the competitive advantage of these routes and their convenience for the businesses and logistics companies. It's a separate matter which is important both for exporters and importers, is the development of trans-border payment infrastructure. It's an open secret that reliability and trust towards Western payment systems has been really undermined, indeed by the Western countries themselves. I'd like to highlight that in the last year, the payments for Russian export in the so-called toxic currencies of non-friendly states has halved. With that, the share of ruble in export and import operations is increasing. Now it's standing at almost 40%. Since 2021 till 2023, the ruble payments for Russian export has increased by almost 300 times, 300%, up to 39%. Will increase use of national currencies in payments with international partners, increase safety and efficiency of such operations, including within BRICS, where working on shaping an independent payment system free from political pressure, abuse, and external sanctional interference. In this regard, I'd like to remind you that this year, BRICS was joined by new participants, that is, Saudi Arabia, Iran, United Arab Emirates, Egypt, and Ethiopia. With this, the share of our association in global GDP has reached 36%, and the population of the planet has reached 45%. And BRICS has tremendous potential for joining of new participants, and such drive of stakeholders from different continents can only be welcomed by us, and will support it. We'll continue to develop relations within BRICS, not only in economy and finance, but also in security and humanitarian cooperation and other spheres. We'll work considering global challenges and objective trends, and I'd like to highlight the growing capacities of the national economies. And now I'll segue to the second important structural change, that is, achieving new quality and content of the economic growth in Russia, the change of the industry structure through an active fostering of economy of supply. The outcome of last year, as you know, the GDP growth in Russia stood at 3.6%, and throughout the first quarter of this year, 5.4%. Meaning that our growth rate exceeds the global average. It is especially important that such trend is defined first and foremost by non-commodity industries. In 2023, and I can give you some information for the background, the GDP growth was ensured through basic industries 45 and 5%. That is manufacturing, production, construction, logistics, communications, agriculture, power generation, and communal services. 61.6%, these were auxiliary industries, that is trade, hospitality, catering, finance, and other services. We have set the goal for ourselves to rank number 4 in largest economy of the world. Indeed, according to certain data, including the evaluation of the World Bank, I think last week, the World Bank has made additional calculations and has ranked Russia as number 4 in the world. Now we have bypassed Japan. Russia is ranked number 4 on GDP, on purchasing power parity, as I have already said, bypassing Japan. But what I would like to highlight is that it's not about the system of evaluation and calculations of GDP. It's not even about the formal ranking, number 4. We're somewhere close. Russia, Japan, Germany, we're all quite close, we're ahead, but still we understand that the leadership positions must be constantly confirmed and strengthened, and other countries are not standing idly. We must ensure consistently high rate of growth and quality of growth for the long-term outlook. That is our task today. It's not only about the economies which are quite close to us, I mean Germany and Japan. The thing is that other countries are also moving up quickly. Indonesia is getting very close to us. The economies are growing, and we should never forget about it. The solution of this task requires strengthening financial, technological, and talent sovereignty, increasing production capacity and improving the competitive advantage of the Russian products, both on foreign markets and domestically. The result of the development of such model of economy of supply should be the decreasing of the level of import up to 17% of GDP by 2030. The trend is good. Look, in 1999, the import in Russia stood at 26% of GDP, and in 2023, it stood at 19% of GDP, or 32 trillion rubles. As I have already said, the trend is very clear and it's positive. I'd like to highlight that the share of import must not be cut down through administrative or prohibitive barriers, but thanks to competitive productions domestically, prepared to cover the domestic needs for processing industries, agriculture, services sector, IT, and many other spheres. We already have successful examples of such strategies, and there are plenty. For example, in agriculture, we have created a modern meat-producing industry. Its capacity has grown almost twofold in the past 15 years, and today, Russia is ranked number 4 in the world in meat production and is increasing its exports to the foreign markets. As for meat production, Russia has 100% self-sufficiency. Consumption of meat in Russia in 2023 last year has broken another record, as now exceeding 80 kilograms per person. And in comparison, the world, on average, consumes 42-43 kilograms per person. It bears repeating that our country will produce more consumer goods, machines, equipment, means of transportation, medicines, and so on. For that, we need to launch new projects, create modern jobs everywhere in all regions of the country. By 2030, capital investment must add another 60% in real terms to the level of 2020. We are all very professional here, and everyone understands what are these capital investments and why it creates such a great foundation for the future long-term development and mid-term development. In the past years, in general, we have been doing quite fine on this in this very crucial sphere. In 2021, our plan stood at 4.5% of investment growth, and in reality, it stood at 8.6% in 2022. The plan was 9.5%. In reality, 15.9%. In 2023, the plan was 15.1%, and in reality, it was 27.2%. So it exceeded the plan by almost twofold. Very good indeed. Naturally, the investment activity has to be backed up by resources. I have already said that we will earmark additional funds for the development of the industrial mortgage. We'll increase almost twofold the foundation of industrial development. We'll increase the capacity of such instrument as Project Finance Factory of VAP.RF. It is already used to implement the projects standing at more than 2 trillion rubles. I suggest that we consistently increase the limit of the factory. We'll increase it at the first stage up to 600 billion rubles. That would allow to support real sector projects with additional 6 trillion rubles. An important task is to increase banking loans for technological sovereignty projects. For that, we'll fine-tune the so-called taxonomy of such projects. It is the system of priorities to support and increase investments in key areas and technological projects aimed at structural changes in the economy. We'll increase the number of projects encompassed by such a system that would allow to raise additional resources for their implementation. The state is prepared to share risks with investors. The foundation of funds for promising industrial and infrastructural technology is already in place. We have discussed it at length. The parameters, we've discussed it in the government, there were debates, we have agreed on it with the entrepreneurial community. Those who took part in that know that fully well. They're present here today. Private initiative is actively investing in Russian economy together with Russian Direct Investment Fund. It's yet another dimension of our work. The State Duma is reviewing draft laws that would help expand the mechanism of private-public partnership and cover industry and space industry. Please adopt this legislation as soon as possible. Another thing, to support the investment activity, naturally we need to develop the capital market, to increase its capacity and attractivity for businesses and investors, and naturally to dedicate special attention to security and return on investment of deposits and investment of the citizens. Today, there are almost 30 million so-called small investors, retail investors. These are citizens. Overall increase of their assets throughout the year has increased by 50% and stood at more than 9 trillion rubles. At the same time, demand on share offering of Russian companies throughout this time consistently exceeded the supply. The task is clear. By the end of this decade, to increase the capitalization of the stock market of Russia by almost twofold and make up 2/3 of GDP. I ask the government, together with central bank, to offer new measures to encourage the companies to enter the stock market with their securities. We should also think about compensating the cost of initial public offering for small tech companies. This is a call for the Ministry of Finance, the central bank. The costs borne by the companies that have to do with banking operations and investments need to be cut to the minimum, and to ensure the flow of long-term money to the financial market, including long-term savings of the citizens. I'd like to remind you that starting with the 1st of January this year, a special program for the support of voluntary long-term savings of the citizens has been launched. Now they're insured and co-financed by the state. You can also receive a tax deduction. The program started recently and is yet to fully deliver. And I suggest that we fine-tune it to increase the co-financing term for citizen savings. Now it stands at 3 years, and I think it will be quite justified to extend it to at least 10 years. I would like to ask the government, together with the central bank, to think about additional encouragement for the businesses, so that employers could also co-finance the savings of their employers within this program. Considering the deficit of human resources, it will be quite justified and will benefit the companies themselves. They can have greater employee retainment. Next year, another instrument will be introduced, savings certificate. It will help citizens make deposits in the banks going beyond 3 years with a higher interest rate than usual deposits, even though right now the deposit rate is quite impressive. And our leading financial institutions are even increasing the rate higher and higher. I don't know whether it's justified or not, but as for deposit holders, this is a big plus. But I hope that Mr. Graf, you together with other people do not take away the resources from other banks. And starting with the 1st of January 2025, we'll launch a shared-based life insurance of the citizens. What's the whole point? Insurance contributions of the citizens can be invested in higher earning assets, benefiting the insurance holder. It combines the principle of classic insurance and investments, and in order to give an additional guarantee for the security of these assets, I suggest that we foresee a state-backed insurance for 2,800,000 rubles, just like for long-term savings. Right now, regions have a mechanism of investment tax deduction in place. It allows the companies that are investing in development to lower corporate tax. Starting with this year, the deduction is connected to the projects of technological sovereignty and structural adaptation of the economy. It gives a chance to manage the quality of investment, to stimulate capital expenditure for priority areas. And I'd like to ask the government to make the deduction applicable not only within one company, but also a group of companies, as well as foresee additional resources for the financing mechanism and offsetting the tax deduction. I'd like to remind you about the decision that has already been made, meaning that the regions can direct the missing revenue due to the tax deduction. They can send part of the funds that have been freed up after the write-off of the budget loans. I think the Ministry of Finance decided to do that. I think it's justified in the current conditions and will help all active economic operators. I'll speak about it later. Besides, I'm sure that regions will support investors directly as well through their budgets. And regions have also increasing budgets. I'd like to highlight that as for investment tax deduction in the regions, in addition, there will be a federal deduction within the retuning of the tax system. The goal of that is to encourage investments of businesses in development and to achieve greater social justice and to bridge the gap of inequality. In the nearest future, together with business associations, we need to define such modalities and the volumes of federal investment deduction for it to become effective and widely relevant tool. Going back to the work of the regions in support of the business activity, I can highlight such mechanism and regional investment standard. Its task is to look at the needs and recommendation of the businesses and ensure a unified principle of attracting investors across the whole country. That means that each region is to shape a universal investment ecosystem and create a clear algorithm of action for businesses, where to place their production and what kind of measures are accessible, and so on. They're relevant. Today, the regional investment standard is introduced in all regions of the Federation. Dedicated specialists have been trained who are responsible for interaction with investors. Dear colleagues and friends, I would like to thank the regional teams and business associations and the government for the work that has been done. I know that there is a suggestion to give legislative coverage for the investment standard, and I suggest that the government discuss this issue with the business community and the region. I can highlight that right now the task is to mainstream this mechanism and to use it actively in practice. That is our goal for the nearest future. And those teams who would achieve the best results, I think we should foresee some kind of encouragements at the level of the government of the Russian Federation. I'd like to emphasize that the launch of regional investment standard allowed many regions in the Russian Federation to make a quantum leap in the national investment climate ranking. As per tradition, their outcomes were represented at the platform of our forum, and I will speak about them later. Over the past year, thanks to exchange of experience and scaling the best practices, the integral index was improved in the 74 regions of Russia. This is much higher than the year before. Among the regions who showed the best trend, Republic of Buryatia and Mordovia, Lipetsk, Ryazan, and Archangel regions. Congratulations, colleagues, upon the results achieved, and I wish you every success in the future. I can add that we'll improve the national investment climate ranking as well by exchanging best solutions in this sphere with the partners in BRICS. Besides, at the recent session of the Advisory Board of the Agency of Strategic Initiatives, we have agreed to fine-tune the methodology of the ranking and to take as a foundation the national target conditions for doing businesses. This is our improved and more objective model of international rankings. Colleagues, third crucial infrastructural change that we're trying to achieve is the new quality of the labor market. Today, Russia has a record low unemployment. In March, it stood at only 2.6%. What's extremely important, we have decreased the so-called structural component, meaning that the significant decrease in youth unemployment and unemployment in those regions and settlements where it was historically high. Even 15 or 20 years ago, the main question was how to find a job. And now the question is how to find an employee. Here, it is important to fine-tune the system of professional education so it can respond to the demands of the labor market, to train specialists with modern and relevant training, for them to give an opportunity to raise their professionals throughout their working career. For that, we are creating a forecast of human resources demands in domestic economy. It will be the foundation for the transformation of professional training and development. By the end of this decade, our labor market should have an increased share of highly qualified employment, meaning specialists working at production with high added value, meaning with higher wages. Bears repeating. The task of the talent training system is to ensure this transformation. A tremendous role is played by the federal project called Professional Talent. It has already allowed to update the physical infrastructure of vocational colleges and schools, update educational curriculum for air and shipbuilding, pharmaceuticals, electronics, defense, and other spheres. For these spheres, till 2028, we are to train about 1 million specialists in trade jobs. We have already spoken about it multiple times. I simply want to remind you about it. As for higher education, in the next 10 years, Russia will have 40 new university campuses with best conditions and capacities, opportunities for students to study, do science, live and work.
I would like to underline that we will assess the performance of higher education institutions and universities of Russia, as well as colleges and vocational schools, based on the demand for their graduates, how fast their salaries are growing. Our economy does not require only young professionals, but also experienced, competent professionals. They are just not experts in their field, but they can also teach their colleagues a lot, turning into true mentors for them. In that regard, it's important to support the desire of people who've reached the pension age to keep on working, to be useful. Their knowledge, skills, competencies serve as an important resource for our economy and social sphere. What am I talking about? I refer to the level of salaries of working pensioners. We've long spoken about this issue. I've just spoken to the governor of St. Petersburg on this subject just before the plenary session. I would like to tell you about a decision we've broached on multiple occasions during my meetings with citizens. Due to budget and financial constraints, in the previous years, there was no indexation of pensions for working pensioners. And it concerns millions of our citizens, and this issue is long overdue, as it were. And right now, we've got resources at our disposal to start addressing this issue for the benefit of our people. So I propose that starting from next year, the indexation of pensions for working pensioners should be resumed. Starting February the 1st, 2025 and onwards, on an annual basis, pensions are going to be raised not just for those who have taken a well-deserved leave, but also for those who keep on working. This is only be fair. I would like to instruct the United Russia Party to work together with the government to draft the relevant draft law for adoption at the spring session. I know that the other factions of the parliament will support this proposal. Moving on to the fourth structural transformation, which has direct relation to raising the efficiency of our economy. This indicator, until the end of the decade, has been set forth in the May decree. Given the demographic challenges we are facing and a clear lack of labor resources, the key prerequisite for securing high rates of economic growth are related to raising our labor productivity. I've spoken about the need to improve investment into upgrading our enterprises, and this has to be done at a new level of technological quality with widespread automation. Russia needs to make it to the top 25 world economies in terms of automation. That implies installing more than 100,000 robots, and they have to be produced in our country at our domestic technological basis, and we've got the capacity to achieve that. Meanwhile, we need to improve the efficiency of the current equipment and technological processes. The main tool in that regard is spreading the methods of lean production. We are already working on that within the framework of the relevant national project, which involves more than 6,000 enterprises and more than 120,000 professionals. This year is the final year for the current national project, and the federal projects that are part of it need to be extended under the framework of the new project, which is entitled Efficient and Competitive Economy. Moreover, this practice needs to be expanded so that by 2030 we will have involved in this project no less than 40% of medium and large enterprises of basic non-commodity industries. And it also should involve all the state-run and municipal organizations working in the social sphere. For companies, for enterprises, that will involve ramping up their output and raising the quality of their services, and it will mean better working conditions for the employees and also a pay rise. I would like to remind you that within the next 6 years, wages need to be growing at a pace bigger than the growth of our GDP. The fifth structural transformation is about a genuine digital platform-driven revolution amid the current environment. Labor productivity is directly related to digitalization and the use of AI. By 2030, we need to build digital platforms across all the key economic industries and also social sectors. These tasks are going to be addressed within the framework of the Data Economy National Project. I would like to add that within the next 6 years, no less than 80% of Russian organizations in the key industries should transition to Russian software in production and management. To support the IT sector, we are going to come up with a whole range of measures, including a higher rate of expense for Russian digital software and digital solutions when calculating the corporate tax. Also, there's going to be a lower corporate tax rate of 5% for Russian IT companies, which will be in force until 2030 inclusive. I would like to ask the government to work through additional measures for supporting Russian developers of software. In particular, there needs to be a certain level of procurement by companies with a public share from small tech companies and startups. I mean, there needs to be a guaranteed level, and the level of procurement cannot fall below that. This mechanism has already been piloted and it's quite efficient. We need to keep it up. We also need to introduce digital solutions in construction and in the utilities sector, using them to reduce the time frame and the cost of projects. Over the last 5 years, thanks to removing administrative barriers and evidently excessive requirements, we've managed to halve the length of investment and construction cycle. I'm not going to dwell on that. a lot has been done, but a lot of work still needs to be done. We will keep this work up to make sure that Russia builds more roads, bridges, plants and factories, and of course comfortable, affordable housing with high levels of energy and resource efficiency. And in that sense, the utility sphere and road construction hold an enormous potential in terms of reusing resources, introducing smart solutions and green standards based on best technology available. And this brings me to the sixth structural transformation, which is an accelerated, proactive introduction of modern technology and innovation into different economic sectors. This is probably one of the key domains. Within the next 6 years, we plan to make it to the top 10 world economies in terms of expense on R&D, and our internal expense on R&D should rise to no less than 2% of the GDP, and we will launch new national projects in technological sovereignty across such key domains as means of production and automation, new materials, chemistry, promising space-based services, energy technology, and a number of others. These projects will allow us to implement a whole range of new solutions, from making science more popular, producing new human resources, R&D, setting up serial production, to ensuring guaranteed demand for high-tech products. I would like to underline that these projects will define the so-called core colleges, institutions, universities, and R&D institutions, which will serve as the basis for rapid growth of our industries across the new country. And we need to improve the legal framework for our business to make sure our businesses feel confident they invest more in longer-term science-intensive initiatives. I would like to point out that Russia has an enormous intellectual and creative potential, and we need to tap it to the full. And of course, we are already witnessing some positive trends. Of the first 4 months of this year, Russia has registered almost 8,000 applications for new inventions and 3,500 applications for utility models, especially in critically important sectors such as metals, energy, transport, and engines. It is vital to ensure the protection of intellectual property of our developments, as well as the commercial efficiency of their solutions, to make sure that rather than being shelved, these inventions and discoveries should turn from an idea to a concrete, tangible product. We also need to make sure that patents can be transferred from clients to developers, as some experts propose, and also the transfer of such patents to small, innovative enterprises and technological companies who know how to commercialize these inventions. And who can do that as a person who has basic education in law? I understand that we need to make sure that there is no legal chaos. If someone has paid for an invention who is the property, then of course the rights need to be protected. We need a flexible market mechanism to make sure that these inventions can be used without any abuse. And the Parliament and the government have to think about that together. This brings me to the seventh structural transformation, which is of the utmost importance, namely the transformation and a greater share of SMEs in our economy. Right now, our country has more than 6.5 million SMEs. 6 years ago, we wanted to increase the number of people employed in this sector to 25 million people. And back then, we thought it would be increasingly complicated. Some were smirking, saying it was unrealistic. Right now, we can confidently say that we've managed to hit it earlier, to achieve it earlier than expected. Our entrepreneurs, including the younger generation, are gaining momentum, entering into the market, setting up the production of new products that very often are better than foreign analogues. Moreover, the Russian business understands that the trademark unique trademark becomes their economic asset. We register more and more applications in clothes and footwear, software, pharmaceuticals, household chemicals, perfume, cosmetics, pastries, and so on and so forth. Last year, we registered 143,000 applications filed for trademarks, twice as much as in the pre-COVID 2019. Incidentally, the registration of trademarks in Russia is one of the fastest, and as compared to the world on average, it has been fully digitized. The examination takes up 4 months, and it results in an electronic letter of protection. And increasingly often we see new, unique, original trademarks which are a tribute to the culture and traditions of our peoples. It is a testimony to the pride entrepreneurs feel for their place of birth, for the region where they are working, and the business sees that people increasingly want to buy goods produced in Russia. Incidentally, many regional brands and trademarks fall within the so-called creative industries. More than half Russian regions are working systemically on their development, and I would like the Parliament to adopt during the spring session a federal law which will create a legal framework for the creative industry, and this will allow setting up standards for supporting the industries. And we need to create an environment that will help SMEs grow even faster, and we will also raise the efficiency of support measures, coming up with new ones. I would like to point out that an important role in developing small businesses belongs to the so-called marketplaces. Together with the Post of Russia, they are building a modern infrastructure, sort of a circulatory system for delivering Russian goods. This allows companies, even in the most remote cities and areas, to get access to the Russian market and to the market of the Eurasian Economic Union. I would like to ask the colleagues in the government to pay special attention to developing such flows of goods when implementing an updated strategy of the Post of Russia and when building the national projects in general. I would like to add that in order to help our businesses in promoting their produce, we have launched a new all-Russian competition, Who We Are. This year, the number of applications has more than doubled, coming from all Russian regions. This competition is growing increasingly wide, and it's a very good business lift, and it's important that such practices are replicated at the regional level as well. I would like to draw the attention of my colleagues, the governors, to this issue. Another thing I would like to point out specifically, almost all participants of the competition and many Russian businessmen, businesswomen are supporting the military and the veterans of the special military operation, their families, their friends and family, our heroes. They're sending their products to the military units, buying goods, equipment, helping hospitals. This lofty understanding of their social mission and their responsibility to the people, to the country, certainly that is something that is cherished and that is deserving of our utmost respect. Distinguished colleagues, the eighth structural transformation is related to tapping the potential of Russian regions. It's about the new geography of development, setting new poles of growth in cities, towns, settlements across the country, to make sure that not just in the capitals, but also in small towns and in the countryside, people can acquire a profession, get a well-paid job, or create their own business, to live and to rear their children in comfortable, modern conditions. Next year, we will launch new national projects and new state-run programs for the development of education, healthcare, sport, and culture in our towns and settlements to make sure that the economic and environmental welfare is guaranteed. But in order to achieve that in social sphere, in demographics, we need the economic basis across the federal and the regional level, and we will improve the economic capacities of our regions. That's why the government is discussing the plans for transferring the headquarters of our biggest corporations and state-run corporations to different Russian regions. These needs careful study, but it's deserving of our attention and support. There are some positive examples already, such as the transfer of Hus Hydro from Moscow to Krasnoyarsk. And of course, we need to concentrate the resources on the promising poles of growth. And this is the approach that we have stipulated in the master plans for the Russian Far East and Arctic cities. We have also agreed to adopt similar documents for another 200 Russian settlements, which will include all the regional centers as well as the cities that play an important role in reinforcing Russia's technological sovereignty to ensure robust, long-term geographic development. We need to remove restrictions in energy, transportation, build and repair roads, engineer frameworks and utilities, and Russian regions are getting infrastructure loans for these ends from the budget. Starting from next year, the volume of such loans is going to grow. It'll add no less than 250 billion rubles on an annual basis, and on the whole, by the end of 2030, the volume of infrastructure budget loans will have risen to 2.5 trillion rubles, and the money is going to be allocated not just based on the limits defined for each and every Russian region, but also based on a competition between different regional and interregional projects. I would like to say that this is yet another solution that is going to support the regional financial systems. We are already starting to write off 2/3 of the budget credits issued before, and the money that will be freed up will be funneled into investment, including the setup of industrial parks and advanced development territories. The money is also going to be spent on infrastructure, upgrading the utilities, building new roads and bridges, upgrading public transportation, and also removing old and dilapidated housing and relocating the residents, and also adopting the master plans. And I would like to ask the government to finalize all the details of this mechanism. Next, in order to remove the bottlenecks in infrastructure, we need to use increasingly the land plots that are used inefficiently, such as the land plots with abandoned or unfinished buildings, and there are dozens of thousands of such land plots across the country. If we choose the right approach, they will generate profits and help people. According to the Prosecutor General's office, Russia has more than 181,000 derelict or unfinished buildings, and just 1/5 of them have some rights or entitlements of ownership to them, and very often there are landfills located on those derelict territories, and the municipalities have no money to look after them. And we have a solution. If the businesses are ready to remove such landfills, then they can probably get such land plots free of charge for their use or for property. I would like to ask the government to held consultations with Russian regions on this subject. And many federal agencies also have land plots they're not using. We need to work out all the details to make sure that no new bureaucratic barriers are set up, and also to prevent any abuse or any stealing of such land plots from cities and settlements. I'm confident that the efficient solution of this this problem will not just improve the urban environment and make the life of our citizens more comfortable. It'll also help increase the capitalization of urban assets, attracting SMEs and developers with interesting projects in housing. This brings me to mortgage. As you know, we've extended the family mortgage until 2030. A concessional loan at 6% can be got by any Russian family with children under 6. I propose an additional special solution for families who live in small towns or who want to buy housing in small towns or regions where no adequate new housing opportunities are available. Such families with 2 children, regardless of the age of the children, can get such a family mortgage at 6%. The only condition is that at least one of the children should be a minor when the mortgage is issued. Moreover, similar concessional terms should be available in all regions of Russia to every family that wants to build a house of their own. It's especially important for big families with many children. I would like to ask the government to launch these programs starting from July the 1st this year. I'll add that to improve the image and the outlook of our cities, we will continue with the Russian competition of the best projects in setting up a comfortable urban environment. It's a very popular program, that's true, and we're getting some very positive feedback. There's also a program for building and improving the embankments and parks. Another special avenue we are going to pursue is the restoration and reconstruction of cultural and historical heritage. By 2030, we need to fix no fewer than 1,000 such sites to give them a new lease of life, for them to serve our people, to improve our identity, to serve as a decoration of our countryside and towns, and to make these sites more attractive to tourists. And the development of internal tourism is another of our priorities. Within the next 6 years, the share of tourism in the GDP should rise to 5%. The number of tourists in our countries should rise to 140 million people. We will provide comfortable environment for recreation, building hotels, campsites, mountain resorts, attraction parks, colleagues. Solutions in economic and social field should not just be efficient, but also fair, and this brings me to the 9th structural transformation, reducing poverty and inequality, raising the income of Russian families. It has a direct bearing on the quality of life and also on the capacity of our national market. Within 8 or 10 years ago, the pension was a very difficult social and financial situation, and we need to make sure that we are improving the income growth. It'll be tied to the overall growth of salaries growth across the economy starting from next year. There's going to be a special relationship created between the minimum wage to the median salary. The majority of our citizens get in our economy. In 2025, the minimum wage is going to be 48% of the median salary, rising to 22,000 rubles per month. So it will have grown by 15%. Then the relationship with the median salary is going to improve to make sure that the minimum wage should rise to no less than 35,000 by 2030. Now, the 10th integral structural transformation is raising the quality of life of Russian families. I've spoken in detail on this subject in my address to the Federal Assembly. We need to act across all avenues, improving the birth rates, supporting families with many children, protecting mothers and children, improving improving the accessibility of care system to senior citizens and people with disabilities, improving education and health care, and of course we need to improve the life expectancy with a special emphasis on extending the active phase of life, a healthy life, and we should also create equal opportunities for younger generations. Colleagues, the global economy has entered into an era of drastic changes. A multipolar world is emerging with new centers of growth, with new investment and financial ties between states and companies. Russia's economy is responsive to these challenges, and it is changing dynamically, becoming increasingly resilient and stable. To a large extent, our workers, engineers and managers are to be credited with that. And of course, the entrepreneurs too who are increasing investment into developing their companies, enterprises, cities and regions. Emerging to the forefront are such principles as responsibility, trust, serving one's nations and one's country. We will improve and support these positive shifts in society and in economy, and our long-term systemic plans are focused on that with a view to reinforcing the financial, technological and human resources sovereignty of our country, as well as improving the business climate. We are open to working with all the interested stakeholders, foreign companies, countries, integration associations. I would like to thank you for your patience, and all the best to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Thank you for a truly impressive speech. I am sure that it would create a lot of optimism for all the people present here and listening to this broadcast, and of course for all Russian people fighting in the front line against yet another aggression of the West. This is the very right speech to say. And now it is my great pleasure to give the floor to His Excellency President of Bolivia, Luis Arce. The floor is yours.
Muchísimas gracias. Muy buenas tardes a todas, a todos.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone.
El presidente Vladimir Putin.
I would like to specifically welcome my dear colleague, President Putin, and I would like to thank him for the invitation to speak at this very important forum. I also would like to express my greetings to the President of Zimbabwe, our moderator, and everyone present in this room tonight. I also would like to extend to you a very warm greeting on behalf of the Bolivian people, and I'm genuinely proud to represent it here. I also would like to thank the organizers from the warm hospitality extended to us, and of course for the invitation to participate in this large international forum in a truly historic city here at the Neva River in St. Petersburg. This is where the very first socialist revolution in the world has happened. And years after, this is the city that has been able to hold a victory against fascism. The siege lasted for 3 years, and it was finally successfully stopped, and fascism was defeated. And I believe that today's world order is moving over to a much more balanced and just state that is based on multipolarity. And of course, we are waiting for various discussions around our transition to a new multipolar world order, a new multipolar economy, where undoubtedly we would be able to learn from the experience of the Russian economy. And I'm sure it will have an important role to play in this new world. This exchange is very important for everyone, especially for those countries that are represented here.
de las relaciones centro-periférica y de la división internacional
And
de
many of
trabajo
them have
impuestas.
fallen victims to this model,
Esta situación
where the
nos ha
economy, the
conducido
world
a ser un
economy,
país
is divided into the
monoproductor
center and the
y primario
periphery. And
exportador,
this is the situation that led
dejando
us
toda
to
la
a place
posibilidad de
where we are a
procesos
country
endógenos
that is
de
producing and
industrialización.
exporting only one particular
Por
item
tal
of
razón,
goods. And it
la
led us
economía
to
boliviana se tornó
deindustrialization.
dependiente, deformada por su carácter de enclave.
The Bolivian economy is now dependent from others. It is a kind of an isolated place. This is the market accepting flows of import from other countries. And we have a lot of miners and people working in the industry, in the extracting industries, and we're exporting this produce to the world markets. The government of Bolivia could not change the situation because neocolonialism was spreading its web around our country, and this is why our government, within the framework of our plurinational state, has carefully listened to desires and dreams of our people, and this is how we started the process of industrialization to ensure national sovereignty and liberalization. This is a focus on industrialization and import substitution. This is a very important item on our agenda, starting from the 19th century, and we have to fight and acquire the true economic independence and sovereignty. And in order to achieve this goal, we recognize that there are many challenges that we have to face. And this is why in Bolivia we believe that being a member of the BRICS group is a great bright prospect for our country, so that we could actually focus on the transformation of our country, together with accelerated industrialization. The BRICS economies have been able to break the hegemony of the United States, and they give us all hope for cooperation, for the ability of the countries to complement one another. And as we know, the world of today is a reflection of the capitalism crisis. This is a massive financial crisis, this is climate crisis, energy crisis, food crisis, water resources, macroeconomic situation, world institutions, they are all in crisis. We see it on the example of the international organizations, and one of the specific features of this crisis, and certainly it has many dimensions, but the main feature is that we exist in an environment that is stopping the world from further development. And in order to create a new development model that is different from the mainstream, we in Bolivia created our own economic model. This is a socially oriented production economy. This is a model that is different from what neoliberalism tried to impose on us. Because in our country we have very important and serious measures for social support and care. We are guided by our fundamental values that are core to the indigenous people of Bolivia, and of course we focus on manufacturing and production. This is a mechanism to create new riches for our country, and this is the model that has been developed, taking into account all characteristics that are typical to Bolivian economy and Bolivian society. So how does this model function? First and foremost, this model is based on the economic growth and development. It is also taking its foundation in the use of natural resources for the good of Bolivian people. This model makes the best of the natural resources with an objective of advanced industrialization and growing our local domestic production. Since the colonial times, Bolivia was rich with a large amount of natural resources. We could recall Cerrito de Potosí, which is a deposit of silver, the largest silver deposit that we had in our country. Also, we have the largest reserves of lithium in our planet, gold deposit, zinc, gas, silver, copper, rare earth metals, and so on and so forth. Those are strategically important sectors of our economy, and they can help us achieve better indicators in development, and they definitely serve the purpose of a fair distribution of all the benefits between the society, taking into account the program that our government is conducting. We particularly focus on those sectors of the economy that contribute to the well-being of our people and create more jobs. And we have in mind not just a more fair distribution of profits and combating inequality that is typical for many countries, but we also are willing to invest into other sectors of our economy. We want to diversify our economy. We want to create more jobs. We want to increase profits and income of our population. We want to ensure sustainable growth and create a truly broad-based economy. In our case, we are aiming for import substitution. We want to develop tourism. We want to increase the productivity rates in agriculture, always in harmony with Mother Earth. And that is why our model is all about diversification of our economy. We want to build a strong, broad-based economy, and we want to improve the quality of lives of our people. And the end target of this process is certainly elimination of poverty and inequality. Social and economic model, those are actually two models that are complementing one another. We started introducing it in Bolivia starting from 2006, and we made some considerable economic and social progress. The GDP of Bolivia went up from 945 million back in 2006 up to 45 billion, 446 million US dollars last year. The per capita GDP went from $1,370 US dollars up to $3,786 US dollars per capita in 2028. In December last year, we recognized the highest employment in the country. That was about 75% employment rate. We have been able to reduce poverty from 71% in 2005 down to 36% last year. And extreme poverty went down from 38% in 2005 down to 11.9% in 2023. Gini index went down from 0.60 down to 0.43 in 2023, which shows that the economic model has brought us some serious economic success, both in terms of social progress and economic results. And in this context of the global economic meltdown and slowdown of growth rates in many developing economies, the growing inequality and poverty in many countries, well, at this background, our model of economic and social development is an alternative approach to developing countries. This model has demonstrated that there is a possibility to encourage sustainable growth that is less impacted by various market fluctuations, unlike those countries who are supportive of free markets. I also should say that the Bolivian model of economic development is pursuing a goal of reducing inequality and poverty thanks to the specific distribution policy and ensuring price stability. What we see in the rest of the world is that inflation rate is setting all-time records. Taking into account the complicated situation at the international arena, we see that transportation and logistic costs are going up. The interest rates are going up internationally, and this is a destabilizing factor for many countries. While the growth rates in Bolivia last year were 3.1%, which is the second best indicator in South America. Again, this is higher than projected by international organizations. So, this model and the social and economic outcomes of it are a clear evidence to the fact that there cannot be one single vision of development for the economy and society. And on our planet, various ways of development may coexist. And certainly all of it is entirely up to the sovereign decisions of independent countries. They are to decide on their economic and political structures and setups, and it has to be the major principle and approach for the whole world. We do see that our model is an alternative to neo-colonial policies based on US dollar, and they are trying to make all other economies dependent from it, undermining multilateralism and multipolar world. The economy of Bolivia ensures full engagement of people economically wise and socially wise. We have reduced inequality and we have been able to create more homogeneous society, more fair and more just society. By doing so, we have proven a hypothesis that a country can develop faster if the incomes are distributed more evenly in a fairer way between all the stakeholders. And in today's multipolar world, we see and we recognize that we need to focus on elimination of inequality. This is true that emerging economies are trying to strengthen their domestic markets, ramp up their revenues, and reduce inequality. But what makes the Bolivian model different is that we have been able to become one of the most dynamically growing economies in Latin America of the last 2 decades. And yet another element of a multipolar world is cooperation and technology transfer between countries. The so far developing countries need support in development of their technological potential, and together with the Russian Federation we share the concern that today technologies cannot fully serve the interest of humanity. This is what they should be doing. They should serve the humanity instead of catering to the interest of transnational corporations or individual countries. And it is indeed a paradox that developing in the poorest country, development projects in the poorest countries are the most expensive to implement, because the cost of construction and creation of infrastructure is extreme. You need to comply with all nature protection requirements and regulations. And if you look at the developed countries, it is clear that it is important to develop technology transfer also in the area of medical services and healthcare. It became obvious when the world faced COVID-19 pandemic, and we realized that new pandemics may happen in the future. We are fighting for a healthier society based on the values, traditional values, cultural values that we've been having for centuries, the culture of our indigenous people that frequently do not share those principles that are being spreaded and enforced all around the world in a unilateral world of capitalism. We see that multipolar world is being established today, and this is where we need to spread our national currencies for settlement purposes between different countries. We cannot allow one country to become the world's central bank, dictating the monetary policy all around the world. Those times have long passed, because we live in a new structure of economy and finance. It has changed dramatically. We are also following the social and economic development to make sure that we take into account the sovereign interests of different countries. We are not ready to tolerate any interferences from the outside, and we demand respect for independent countries and their sovereign decisions on the use of their natural resources. And this is why in Bolivia we make a major bet on multipolar world order. And that is decisive for the historic destiny of the whole humankind. And shaping of this multipolar world is facing various risks and threats. For example, we need to secure enough food for the constantly growing world population. We've been discussing it before that one of the problems of the modern capitalism is food crisis, and solution to this problem has to be found within the paradigm of multipolarity. We need to establish cooperation programs with the pursuit of creation enough food all around the world. And for that, we need to facilitate technology transfer that would increase productivity rates in agriculture.
This should also be one of the foundations for the economic development of a multipolar world. Unfortunately, we see that today, in many countries, there are high rates of undernourishment, poverty, and lack of public services. We see that tremendous funds are being funneled into building military bases in other countries and military budgets. The military bases that are situated in third countries. We also think that Russia, as well as BRICS countries, we too are concerned with the threat of a hybrid war in many dimensions that is detrimental to our development and industrialization. We see today there is an oligarchy system that serves foreign interests. We're talking about that at different conferences, security conferences, and scientific conferences. For example, such a strategic resource as Bolivian lithium can help industrialization of Russia, China, and other developing countries. the threat to the stability of our government and continued industrialization, as well as our model of economic development in Bolivia, might lead to such a situation where our political project might be rolled back. We have a tremendous amount of precious natural resources, and we want to produce these resources, trying to prevent harm to the environment as much as possible, and to do that to the benefit of the humanity. This should be a mutually beneficial cooperation. Today, we should not see such practices as production of just one mineral element or growing just one agricultural good. Now we're going to the concept of multipolar, multilateral world and creation of new blocks, such as BRICS countries. We need to promote, as soon as possible, the building of such alliances and unions in order to promote the goals of this forum. They coincide with Bolivian national goals. We need to join our efforts and to come to a multipolar world. This is the path that guarantees stability, peace, and development, as well as happiness of our peoples in the harmony and in balance with Mother Earth. We need to live well on our planet. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President, for a very interesting intervention. It was very instructive. It has proven yet again that economy is not a national science, it's an art, and each country should choose their own model. In this regard, I have a question right away for Vladimir Putin. Shall we maybe decide, maybe you could instruct us with the participation of such economists as President Arce, shall we maybe develop our own model? It is apparent that we're doing something, but it is clear that we haven't decided yet what precisely we're doing. We have started to develop our military-industrial complex, and generally, by trial, we're succeeding. But it seems that we don't have a master plan. Maybe as part of the International Economic Forum or on the margins, shall we maybe create a permanent institution that would use their own brain, so to speak, and the brains of our practitioners? Because economists who are scientists, and I know them, though I'm a former economist, that there are no former economists, so to speak. But we're stuck in an old model. Mr. President, Mr. Putin, would you maybe give us a task and to the St. Petersburg International Forum to create a working group to develop, to elaborate a new model? It could be put together here during the forum or maybe on the margins of the forum. Maybe we can invent something, a regional method for ourselves, and to understand where are we going. I feel that they are not going more of a speeches, but more of a discussion, because what you're saying sounds offensive to the government of the Russian Federation and to others as well. You said that we're doing something. I've been standing here for an hour and explaining what we're doing. Now, did you fall asleep? Maybe you took a nap, a cat nap, as they say, and you didn't hear what I said? For an hour, I was speaking about a whole program of of 10 items on the agenda. Therefore, we're not just doing something, we're working on a new development strategy, and we have it in place. And we've done it for more than a year, not alone. We've done it together. Those brains that you've mentioned, entrepreneurial community with their associations, we constantly have meetings and conferences. We didn't do anything behind closed doors. And you suggest create certain structures, institutions. We have them in place. That central bank, the government of Russian Federation, and part of the presidential administration in Russia. Now, as for the creation on the margins or within the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum, a working group that could do something on the margins of the forum. It is well known, we know a famous saying, and we know who said it. If you want to fail something, you need to create a working group. But I have to admit, we have so many working groups right now. I don't know where to chair them. There is yet another working group, and you need to be the head of it. I said, all right, I will think about it. And here, on the margins, yes, we can do that. But in the summer, please, because it's so cold, on the margins of St. Petersburg. But you're well known in our country, not only as an economist, but also as a political scientist, as a very outstanding person, and in certain dimensions of the thought, you're rather robust in your ways of thinking, and it's always interesting to listen to such people, and I say it without any flattery. Besides, I have to admit that sometimes I read what you write and what you say. Therefore, we're not refusing to have this discussion. We're prepared to discuss everything that would benefit the Russian economy. Very well. Of course, I will agree with my president. But with one clarification, what kind of a model are we building? Do we know? I think that a perfect model for Russia would be an authoritarian socialist capitalism. So it is clear. Where are we going? Because it seems that we're going the right way, and before that we followed the liberal path. I cannot really understand. Yes, we're doing something, and we're proud of what the government is doing. Finally, they've started to do it. Well, incidentally, when the thunder struck, but before that, nothing happened. Well, we'll overcome all circumstances, every difficulty. As for the model, I recently spoke during the meeting with the heads of news agencies from around the world. We need to look at what's happening around the world. For example, the Chinese model is believed by many experts to be more efficient than those models that existed before, including the North American or the European model. It is more efficient. That is true. That is basically what you've just said. It has the combination of planned economy and a market economy. The Chinese managed to do that in their conditions, and I agree with this evaluation. It is indeed so. The figures of economic growth speak for themselves. But that works for the Chinese society and for the Chinese economy. I can agree with the following. When you gave a characteristic of my colleague, you mentioned that economy is a science, but to a certain extent, it's an art. Possibly so. Such models, when they're rigid, when it's one size fits all for all countries who are in different conditions, in different stages of its development, such rigid schemes do not work or work badly. And you always need to follow the reality of your country. And all things matter: the history, the culture, and the fabric of the society. Real development is crucial here, to look at what works efficiently in our society. Naturally, there are basic things, and we always consider them. For example, talking about challenges, but I think it was 3.6%. We haven't calculated it, gave in final evaluations, but as for 4.5% growth in first quarter of this year is also a good result of our joint work of the government, of the business community, and central bank and the presidential administration to boot. This is the result of our targeted action. And as for what is the foundation of our model, well, I have just spoken. We are creating the backbone, and we're always making some decisions that have to do with the adjustment of our economic model. Just like any citizen of Russia, I'm happy that in the past 2 or 3 years, due to the special military operation that we are taking to the front, we are finally getting down to business. And before that, we were sort of drifting along. Therefore, I'm talking about the need to establish a very clear understanding where we're going. But we'll get back to it. But I suggest that we give the floor to the President of Zimbabwe, Emerson Mnangagwa. Please, let's listen to your experience, because the country was developing in extremely hard conditions. You were under sanctions. How long? I think throughout all of its history, right? Still, you survived and you started to develop. How did you manage that?
Your Excellency Vladimir Putin, the President of the Russian Federation, Your Excellency Luis H., the President of the plurinational state of Bolivia, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to extend my heartfelt appreciation to our gracious host, my dear brother, His Excellency President Vladimir Putin, for the warm hospitality and for creating this platform for us to discuss critical issues that affect us in today's global landscape. Your Excellency, may I, on behalf of the people and government of Zimbabwe, and indeed on my own behalf, personally congratulate you once again on your re-election as the President of the Russian Federation. Your commitment to the welfare and the prosperity of your people and the defense of independence, peace, security, and territorial integrity of the Russian Federation is unparalleled. Zimbabwe is confident that your continued leadership would accelerate progress and development in your motherland, the Russian Federation. Your Excellencies, it is regrettable and unacceptable that the collective West continues to pursue hegemonic tendencies that blatantly violate sovereign equality of nations, justice and fairness, as embodied in the United Nations Charter. There is general consensus that unipolarity has no place in modern global politics and international economic relations. The reality points to a redistribution of power among nations, as well as the emergence of multiple centers of economic growth, innovation, and cultural influence. We recognize that a multipolar world is the panacea to both opportunities and challenges that confront humanity today. The old geopolitical global order, dominated by a select few, resulting in the perpetual marginalization of most of us in the global south, is no longer acceptable. A situation where some Western countries try to dictate to us who our friends should be will also never be tolerated by us in Zimbabwe. Advancing and embracing multipolarity has greater potential for us as Africa and the developing third world to realize balanced, inclusive development, modernization, and industrialization. Under the Second Republic in Zimbabwe, Zimbabwe is guided by the philosophy that we are a friend to all and an enemy to none. We are convinced that mutually beneficial cooperation, partnerships, and investments anchored by complementarity are a more sustainable foundation for a multipolar world and the formation of new areas of growth. To this end, we welcome the transformation of the global economic relations and the geopolitical landscape through BRICS, with additional new members, along with other emerging economies. In these efforts, the role of Africa remains critically important, not as a mere supplier of raw materials, but as a dependable global partner in every facet of human endeavor and development. As we pursue new areas of growth, the abundant subsoil assets of Africa should be leveraged to drive shared sustainable development and economic prosperity. The new global supply chains demand that Africa be accorded the requisite support with regards to value addition and beneficiation. Further, there is need to enhance the productive capacities of Africa. This is more urgent in view of Africa's vast natural resources in critical green minerals, large tracts of arable agricultural land, and a youthful population with robust entrepreneurial spirit. Coupled with the united market presented by the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, all lead to the right mix for shared growth under a fair, just, and mutually beneficial multipolar global order. In our case, Zimbabwe, we call for the removal of illegal sanctions, which you have mentioned, that have held back our economic development and growth for the past 24 years. What is our crime? The crime of the people of Zimbabwe was that they demanded their land to be united with the people and the people to be united with their land. As all other nations have the same goal and status. But for Zimbabwe to achieve that, we had sanctions imposed on us. To this end, strategic investments in the key enablers and sectors of our economy are essential to unlock our potential. These include infrastructure, education, science and technology, renewable energy sectors, and climate change adaptation. Your Excellencies, Zimbabwe is open for business and welcomes investments, partnerships, and collaboration in all sectors of the economy. Technology and innovation serve as catalysts for growth, possessing the capacity to build bridges, grow new industries, and revolutionize our economy. For us to leapfrog the development of our economy, we don't need to invent the wheel. As a result, we are embracing the digital revolution, investing in science, technology, and innovation ecosystems, and promoting education encouraged by digital literacy at all our state universities. Our aspiration is to leapfrog Zimbabwe into an upper middle income country by 2030. In this regard, we actively seek partnerships and collaboration to realize this vision. As a nation, we are leveraging our strategic geographical location at the center of Southern Africa, as well as skilled and educated workforce, abundant resources, and manufacturing expertise to harness the opportunities presented by new prospects for growth and increased trade. We once again extend a cordial invitation to our brothers in the Russian Federation, investors, to explore business opportunities which are abundant in Zimbabwe. Your Excellencies, in a multipolar world, solidarity and cooperation among nations are indispensable. The challenges we confront in the spheres of peace and security, climate change, pandemics, and economic inequalities, among others, demand collective global action and cooperation. This should remain rooted in our shared desire for peace, unity, and development that leaves no one and no place behind. In this respect, Zimbabwe considers the Russian Federation as a consistent global ally. To harness the opportunities presented by a multipolar world, it is necessary to shift the paradigms in our approaches to cooperation, synergies, investments, and partnerships. Zimbabwe is committed to play its part in this transformative process. As we embark on this journey together, let us remain mindful that strength lies in our unity, adaptability, and innovation. Together, we can forge a multipolar world that is more just and inclusive and prosperous for all. Zimbabwe, in spite of 24 years of sanctions by the West for the crime of claiming our land, which every country has done, sanctions have been imposed on us for the last 24 years. However, because of resilience, peace prevailing in the country, Zimbabwe's economic GDP has grown during the Second Republic in 2018 from 26 billion to now 69 billion in 2023, in spite of sanctions imposed on us. We also embrace the policy as a people living under sanctions to move on with everybody of our people with the philosophy that a country is built, developed, defended, and prayed for by its own people. As a small country in the southern hemisphere, Zimbabwe has abundant land for agriculture, and with the modernization and mechanization of agriculture, we can easily become the basket of food security in our region. And for that purpose, we seek cooperation to those in the first world, the developed world, to assist us leapfrog in the modernization and mechanization of our agriculture. As I conclude, allow me, Your Excellency and dear brother, President Putin, to thank you on behalf of the people and government of Zimbabwe, and indeed on my own behalf, for the generous and timely donation you have given to our country at the critical time of need. I also appreciate Your Excellency availing through Ultrachem and Dmitry Mazepin a vessel for the transportation of fertilizers to Zimbabwe. We are grateful that we received it correctly at the time we needed it in terms of our tropical season for agriculture. This, however, my dear brother, is a demonstration of your commitment to support small and developing countries like Zimbabwe. And in your endeavor for the consolidation of our relations, we in Zimbabwe look upon you as a dear and a trusted friend of the people of Zimbabwe who have for the last 24 years suffered under sanctions, and there is no light that will be removed. In spite of that, my dear brother, our economy has grown, and it is the fastest growing economy in our region in spite of sanctions imposed by the West. Therefore, as a demonstration of your commitment to support small countries like Zimbabwe, we have achieved food security as you supported us in fertilizer acquisition. May I, on behalf of my country, my people, indeed on myself, cherish your consistent support to a country under sanctions. And in that regard, I wish to promise Your Excellency that we are better off with the continued imposition of sanctions because we concentrate to survive. With those remarks, my dear brother, I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. We're very proud for you, but we're also proud of our country because we are helping your success in the difficult hour of need. And let's now move on to the discussion part of the session. All states, all countries are developing based on three factors. The first factor is military power, military might. The second power is ideas, spirit, and will. And the third factor is the economy. For many years, in the footsteps of the president of a very big country, we always thought that economy was the determining factor of everyone. But honestly, all of these factors are important. And right now, we are at the point of geostrategic transformation. And emerging to the forefront are the first two factors. But economy is still very important because economy underlies might. Without bread, without economy, the spirit of the nation can be crushed, and this is something we suffered back in the 1980s. So I suggest we should begin with the economic factors. Mr. President, I would like to refer to point 8 of your program. You did not say what the direction is we are following in, but in point 8, you mentioned territorial development. But you have not mentioned one avenue which is of the utmost importance, in my view. We have completed our journey to the West. It's been enormously useful, and it's benefited us a lot. But right now, the world has changed. We do hope that the confrontation in the West is not going to degenerate into some terrible form. But right now we're turning to another world that is currently on the ascendant. So we need to shift the center of our spiritual, economic, and to a certain extent political development towards Siberia and to the Russian Far East. In the past, you proclaimed the pivot to the east, but that pivot was carried out first through the Far East, then also thanks to the Northern Sea route. You spoke at this forum in 2019, and back then you mentioned the need to set up new scientific and production capacities in central Siberia, and then COVID struck, then the special military operation started, and all of that somewhat faded into the background. But let's take that up once again, because we need to shift the center to the east. There are new centers where new industrial centers can be set up to process non-ferrous metals, to build new energy, to build machinery closer to Lake Baikal, where, the forest chemistry industry is also immensely developed. So we could come up with a strategy for the development of Siberia as a whole. It would be called kind of a Siberization of Russia. Why are we hesitating? Yes, there was a project for the development of the Siberian district. I studied it, but as far as I know, you didn't like it either. But still, the development of Siberia, in my view, is a must, and we need to embark on this path as soon as possible. Developing the whole of Siberia. I agree with you in that we need to develop the eastern parts of Russia, western Siberia, eastern Siberia, the Russian Far East. We started with the things were most urgent in terms of preserving our territories and developing them. We started with the Russian Far East because we were experiencing a fast depopulation, and there was no way we could afford that to continue. And we can see that a lot has been done over the last decades, the last 10 years, to be more precise, in terms of developing the Russian Far East. I'm not going to dwell on that right now, but we've had an extensive program to that end. And the same applies to Siberia in general. Both Western Siberia and Eastern Siberia, Western Siberia has been developing extensively, starting from the Soviet times, because, it is the source of mineral resources the whole country utilizes. Still, gradually, the center of economic development is moving eastwards and northwards. You know who said that Russia is going to grow through Siberia. Right now, we can say that Russia is going to be growing through the Arctic as well, because the bulk of mineral resources is located over there in the north. Yes, it's expensive and difficult to develop those resources, but still it's a promising avenue to pursue, and this is precisely what we're doing. I have just spoken about the development of the eastern polygon, the railroad. We started this work a long time ago, when the Trans-Siberian mainland was constructed before the Russian-Japanese War, and then the Baikal-Amur mainland during the Soviet times, and right now in the new history of Russia, we set the goal for the development of this avenue. Yes, we had some miscalculation. We didn't think it would be as much in demand. That's what the government had thought, so it has prolonged the development of the eastern polygon, but still this development is moving forth.
It is happening. happening, not to the scale initially planned, but we will be doing that. It's just that under the current circumstances, we can't afford to do it in the way that it was done during the Soviet time or even during the reforms of Stolypin. All he had to do is to hand out land. Why? The major means of production back then was land. Right now, the major means of production is human brains. We need to develop technologies. We need to build universities and train and educate proper people for that. And that's what we're focused on as well. During my speech, I mentioned student campuses in 40 universities that are to be created. We talked about development of science and education. I talked about the necessity of use of robotization, AI. Well, to a large degree, all of it will be happening in Siberia. This is our approach, and this is where we're going to move our biggest companies. Unfortunately, you can't do it purely through the administrative effort. I already mentioned some companies that operate in Siberia anyway, specifically Rushydro. This is one of the largest, if not the largest, hydropower company in the world. And the manager of this company, when I appointed him, I told him there is one condition: you have to move over to Siberia. This is where the headquarters would be. And he agreed. Will the family go with you? He said it would. And clearly, it's not just about building a house. You have to hire people there. And this particular manager was ready to go to Siberia straight away. But hiring the right people there, it's no easy story. Some people are ready to relocate, some are not, some you can't afford to lose. This is a process, and this process has to evolve organically. But undoubtedly, this is the goal we have. I fully agree with you on that. And we have to pursue it very consistently, because the centers of the world development is there, and we have to be closer to those centers. Peter the Great was breaking the window, building the window to Europe, because the center of development was in Europe back then. The centers of the world development right now are shifting towards Asia. There is no doubt about it, and we have to be closer to those centers. You're right. I would like to have a quick follow-up question that I've been preparing for a long time. Well, Peter the Great is renowned for establishing close ties between Russia and Europe, opening up Russia to Europe. Back then, that was the most promising market. Why don't we create the third capital in Russia so that we stand on three pillars? Somewhere around one of the largest cities. This is where young, talented people would be ready to relocate, that are truly energetic. This is where we would create new elite. Based on your order, we could move some ministries there. And you've just said it yourself. Administrative resource alone can't do all of it, but still it can do much. And many companies would be forced to relocate, to follow high salaries if you decide so. Don't you want to repeat the great deed of Peter the Great? He did it well. Well, Peter the Great is a truly historic figure. And he was the Tsar of Russia and then Russian Emperor. And the conditions there were entirely different. The state of the society was entirely different. The process of goal setting back then was entirely different. In today's world, we need to use those means that would be effective today. And no matter how close we are mentally to taking fast decisions and act through administrative resource, I still believe it is crucial to think carefully how successful can we be if we simply try to issue instructions and orders to the society. I believe we need to act differently. First and foremost, we need to get society interested in making progress. You need to get the society excited. And if we create the right conditions for development, then the centers of economic activity would be automatically shifting there on their own. Just to cite their example of the Far East. Many years ago, I visited the shipbuilding enterprise there. It was close to Vladivostok. And back then, it was in a dire condition. And this is when I said that here we are not just going to recover what we used to have, but we are going to establish new competences. We're going to build new ships there. You should have seen people standing around me back then. Those were regular workers and engineers. They looked very skeptical. And I have to tell you, it took massive effort to build the cluster that is being created there right now. It's not just about money that would be constantly embezzled, and unfortunately I have to acknowledge that. We tried to approach this project several times, twice or even 3 times, and the current leader of Rosneft, Igor Sechin, has put his hands on that and created a large whole ship construction and shipbuilding enterprise there, and it took massive effort. It's not an easy thing, but what I'm trying to say is that we finally have the right talent there. Since the salaries are high, people are ready to move, and the level of salaries went up. The level of technological culture is now much more advanced. There is a cooperation with the neighboring countries in the region, and right now, the leadership of shipbuilding industry is all around VTB Bank and Mr. Kostin, who is seated here in the front row. I am really pleased to see that he's very much engaged into this business. It looks like as if he has never been in finance and he would dedicate all of his life to shipbuilding. Right now we're thinking where else we could create one more enterprise of a kind, and we also see that it could be somewhere on the ocean coastline or close to the coastline. And through that kind of natural, and I'm sorry, I'm really worried I may traumatize your imperial mindset, but we're trying to pursue that through the market ways and market approaches. And this is a good promise for success. Of course, this work is complicated, but it would be really substantial. And when I mentioned Stolypin, yes, back then it was all about strict orders and commands, and we all remember the tough measures that were imposed up to extreme and death sentences. But back then it was economically feasible and meaningful to act in this particular manner. You provide people with a major means of production, you provide them with land, you provide them with the right conditions, and then it would work. Right now, giving orders and commands is not enough. I guess the approach that I'm suggesting is much more substantial, and this is where we are very likely to succeed. But otherwise, you're right. Of course, we need to focus on this particular area. Mr. President, I'm no bigger imperialist than you are, I believe. But it's just that I'm more vocal about it, probably. But I know one thing for sure. We carefully studied this matter, and those countries who decided to create new capitals, to move their capitals, would inevitably end up with a massive economic impetus being given to this particular country and this particular location. We need to remember about this experience, and I still believe that we shouldn't kill the idea of thinking about the third capital. All right, then. Thank you very much. Now, let us move on to a somewhat broader question. We see that right now the old world order, the old economic system is falling into pieces due to many reasons, and one of the major reasons for that is that initially the Soviet Union and later Russia were trying to attack the state of affairs of the West that has been in dominance for 500 years, culturally and economically. Then we started to be more active, then the system shifted, then the Soviet Union collapsed, and now we are resurrecting, we are rebounding, and we are fighting for the dominance. And now the system is falling apart, and this process will go on for quite a while. This is both good and bad, because so far there are virtually no new regulating mechanisms, and there is no master plan on what to do next. Our Chinese friends are trying to create some very general, broad vision. Have you thought that probably Russia could come up with an initiative to develop a master plan for the new economic system, world economic system, by attracting the best minds from new countries? Maybe in a while, good, talented people will get back from the old world. Well, maybe here in St. Petersburg, again, somewhere close to the forum or at the platform of the forum, we could create a think tank that would focus on establishment of the perimeter of a new economic system. The Bretton Woods system is dead, or almost dead. Maybe we could set up St. Petersburg system as opposed to Bretton Woods system. And by the way, nobody would be intimidated. If China is to do that, everyone would be intimidated. India wouldn't go for it. We could do business both with China and India, and we also see that our African friends would be ready to participate. And I think eventually, even the US partners and experts could work with us, and we could make the best of the experience for internal projects. Maybe this is the work we could focus on. What do you say? Well, this is no longer an imperialist idea. Well, I'm not sure that they would be ready to recognize this kind of system. Look, Bretton Woods system is long dead. In 1976, and it was replaced by a Jamaica system, but at the same time, Bretton Woods system was largely based on the gold equivalent. In 1976, around this date, a number of other decisions were being made, and back then the United States decided to step away from the gold equivalent, and this is how Jamaica system was established. And this system decided to detach US dollar from gold equivalent. And what is the foundation for this Jamaica system? This is still in force up until now. This one is based on trust towards US economy. What is happening right now in reality? There is no other promise, no other collateral rather than trust towards US economy. There is nothing else to support that in the world financial system. And right now the United States are exploiting and abusing their dominant position on the world financial market. And this exploitation is generating them a lot of money. According to the data that we have publicly available, the United States own the world economy about 54.3 trillion US dollars. This is the level of their debt. What is this number comprised of? This is 12.6 trillion US dollars. This is what individuals hold on their bank accounts, or literally in their pockets or under mattresses, as we say it in Russia, outside of the borders of the United States. Plus 10 more trillion is borrowed by the US companies. So this is 22.6 trillion of US dollars that are not backed by anything rather than trust towards US economy and belief in the US economy. And the remaining 54.3 is what the residents of other countries decided to invest into US companies. And that kind of investment in the US company is backed by reliability and valuation of those companies. But of course, their security and reliability is strongly dependent on the US economy and US system as well. So what is happening in the world in this regard? The US economy is shrinking in size, and the foundation, the major pillars of the economy are no longer that strong. There are cracks on them. I'm not only talking about the state debt that is massive, but they're not always coping with the goals they set themselves in terms of inflation targeting. They have targets on inflation of 2%, but as we've seen it lately during the pandemic, they go well above 7.8%, which is undermining trust towards the US economy. Well, what is backing US economy if it is still shrinking? Well, there is nothing to back it, and this is a problem. Undoubtedly, this is a problem for all holders of US dollars. and US money base and assets. So, the fact that the US economy is shrinking, its share in the global economy is being reduced, and it is entirely natural. And this is our shift towards multipolarity in the world economy and world finance. We could definitely come up with alternative systems, but the importance, the role of a given currency is strongly dependent on the economy where it's circulating. So what we do right now is that, together with our BRICS partners, we are designing this work together. And the role of Russia in this regard can be quite meaningful. We have established the new development bank. We have established our own currency tools. And a large part of the participants of economic activity are switching over to settlement in national currencies. Take example of China. 90% of our trade is settled in renminbi and Russian rubles. If you look at the territory of post-Soviet countries, the share of Russian ruble is also getting close to 70%. So our role in this regard is quite meaningful, but we have to do it together. That would make it all more substantial. What the US financial authorities are doing right now, we've been discussing it yesterday with some of our colleagues until late yesterday. We've been discussing the composition of our today's session and the potential topics, and we came to conclude that the US authorities, just like what was happening in the UK, they've been intentionally breaking the equipment, the hardware, they've been using themselves, that kind of sabotage. And this is what exactly the US authorities are doing themselves. They are destroying and breaking down the mechanism of ensuring their dominance and their supremacy. And US dollar is a mechanism of US supremacy today. And with their own hands, they are fostering the road to step away from the use of US dollar. And that would be happening anyway due to the shrinking US economy. But through those actions, they are only accelerating this process, and it's only logical that new payment mechanisms are emerging, let's say financial instruments of the central banks that we're talking about within the BRICS format. There are also some other thoughts on that. For example, right now, our colleague from Zimbabwe mentioned the importance of attracting investment. Yes, that can be done and should be done, and not just for Zimbabwe, but also for other African countries and countries of South and Southern Asia in particular, and all developing countries. But we need to create the right instruments that would provide guarantees for this investment and their returns. What else can we use other than gold when it can be guaranteed through the quality of the investment projects? If we are to provide for high quality of the investment project, then we have to do that together. Quality and stability of political regimes. Well, that can allow us to establish settlement system that would be entirely protected from volatility and inflation. It can be done, and we've been discussing it with my friend and colleague, President Xi, during my visit to China. We are going to discuss it with other leaders of BRICS countries. It is a very important area of joint work for us. Well, I'm very happy to hear that. But please think, we are somewhat slow on that. We are talking about currency basket for comprised of 8 or 9 currencies, be that Euro, Asian, or BRICS currencies, but so far there is not much progress in this regard. And as you probably know, there is a bit of internal competition. Yes, that may happen, but well, I'm primarily talking about the analog of SDR in a way.
However, if we take upon ourselves a certain leadership, if we can speak well, if we can organize substantial work, then all of us, we can help the smaller countries. I'm almost positive that Mr. Arce and Mr. Nanangwa will agree that if Russia starts to offer some solutions, they will join such a project. Yes, you're quite right. We need to accelerate. And we can only win from their advice. Yes, you're quite right in the fact that we need to accelerate. I agree. Very well. Then I have the question, yet another economic question. What is happening right now is a great growth of military expenditure and the military-based economy. That is heartwarming, because we're going back to ourselves. As one of the outstanding St. Petersburg historians said, Russia has always been developing as a military organization of the Russian peoples. When we forgot about that, we collapsed. Now we're getting stronger, as also required by the situation. But there is an issue. And we need to think about it in advance. Right now, our GNP, 8% is being allocated for military expenditure. It's less than 13% in the Soviet Union that was spent back then. Well, we don't really know how much was spent back then because there was no total aggregate figure of military expenditure. Besides, we spent a lot of money for the maintenance of socialist countries and socialist-oriented countries. Therefore, the military and military political budget of the country was much higher. Still, the comparison with the Soviet Union is concerning. Sooner or later, we have to win this war. The sooner, the better, I think. 2 years tops through very resolute measures. We'll talk about it later. Do we have a conversion plan right now? With certain enterprises, with business plans, with the business community. I remember the terrible experience of the beginning of the 90s. We were stuck in that situation when we have spent away high-tech industries. We have thrown away millions of wonderful trade job employees. Are we prepared right now, at least for a partial conversion, so that they're prepared as soon as we start to cut down on the military production? In the 90s, we simply did not spend away. We destroyed all of that capacity. I know that fully well. I remember it because I used to work here in St. Petersburg. 70% of the city's economy was made up by the military and defense industry. Almost all of it was destroyed to the ground. Naturally, from the beginning of 2000s, we had to start working on rebuilding that. A lot was done already on up-to-date industrial basis. But we always believed that we would need to think about the conversion. Not simply about conversion, but we need to think about the development of these productions in a modern way. What do I mean by that? Because around the world, those who produce special equipment and munitions and military equipment, they also produce the civilian-oriented products, and that has tremendous synergy in not only raising investment, but also attracting high technologies. And we're quite successful. We have a plan. It is always in place and always being executed. For example, take last year. Defense industry produced about 25% of civilian production, about 25.1%, or maybe 0.2%. That was 2022, and last year, that civilian production stood at 29-something%, almost 30. Therefore, this process is always taking place. We also must think about our military expenditure and that they are in line with the needs of today and the level of development of our economy, because we cannot parasitize on anything, as it is, for example, being done in the United States. Their balance of payments deficit, their trade balance, is at about $1 trillion per year. Try to imagine that. Everyone here in the audience can really understand what that is. This is neo-colonialism in its modern issue. Using the monopoly of dollar, the United States are consuming by $1 trillion per year more than they produce, pumping out the resources from other countries. We were thinking back to the pandemic and the times of the pandemic. What was done back then? I don't remember how much money they printed. I think about $5 and something trillion. And Europe printed about 3.4 trillion euro. What was done next? They distributed this paper around their country. Later, they started to buy up food goods like a vacuum cleaner. They cleaned out the whole world. And for the first time, for many years, they were not exporters, but net importers of food. Right away, the food inflation skyrocketed around the world. But we cannot behave this way. We don't have this monopoly on the world currency as the US does. And we've never behaved ourselves as colonialists or neo-colonialists. Here, we need to use the capacity of the economy and to have a realistic evaluation of it. That is precisely what we do. And we try to balance out the situation in the industry, in the real sector of economy. And for the future, naturally, we're thinking about diversification. That is how we work. Thank you. Wonderful. Yet another question about economy, because I know that this question is very important for a major part of the audience. I'm not as bothered by it, but still, I can feel the vibe. We're conducting partial nationalization. Some say that it is being done to amend those terrible mistakes, or whatever that was, during the round of privatization. Those reforms indeed were rather dumb. Now we have a matter of private property, and that was the reason for tremendous corruption, because there was a matter of corruption and organized crime. Well, now we have a reverse correction of privatization, but where is the limit? Where is the limit for that deprivatization? Can we define them, finally? Because if we say that we correct those mistakes that were done back in the 90s, then all mistakes were made, because everything that we did was illegal. It was done illegal with violations. I had to deal with those economic processes because science did not give me any wages, and I had to keep my family up. So I know what was happening back in the day. So everyone needs to be deprivatized right now. But that would undermine the foundation for our success. We saw the way private capital, including in our complex war conditions, is very flexibly finding and filling new niches, and gives us a much more flexible economy if it was purely state-based. Should we stop somewhere? Maybe we can say that the mineral resources are being taken away by the state. We prohibit the outflow of capital, and would declare private property sacred after a certain extent. And the KPI of governance and all leadership would be based on the level of defense of private property. As for mineral resources, they're all, even right now, they're the property of the state. That is the way it works. Sometimes they're leased to be managed by the companies. Still, it's a property of the state. Second thing, you spoke about criminal or wrongful privatization of the 90s. You know, however hurtful it might be for many in the country, still, I would not use such terms. I would not call it illegal or criminal. I don't think that it was done deliberately for criminal ends, but it was largely erroneous. It was based on the opinion of the economists with world-renowned names, also with Russian background. They said that everything needs to be privatized as soon as possible, even if it costs $1. Most importantly, that it lands in the hands of effective managers, and a state cannot be a successful manager. Life has proven to us that in our country, in the conditions before and now, that's not quite the correct approach, to put it mildly, to receive the top result and to have most efficiency. It turns out that the state can also be an effective owner, can show it in multiple situations, especially in major industries that require tremendous investments, because back in the day, no one had something to invest. Therefore, come the fraudsters with their schemes. And during this false privatization, which is basically pillaging of state property, money was borrowed from the state banks. They took it for half a penny for the asset. After it fulfilled its goal, they returned the asset or returned the loan. So basically, that's pillaging. Now, maybe it was economically incorrect, but still legal solutions that have to do with privatization, I would not revise that. The prosecutor's officers deals only with matters that are criminal in terms of privatization of state-owned property. But you're quite correct in the sense that there should be some healthy limit lines. And we speak about that with the business community. And I'm a proponent of making a decision not at the level of a presidential decree or a governmental decree, but as a law. Right now, we are thinking about that with the business community. And I'm sure that we will find a solution. Thank you. Now let's move on to political issues. You always speak about your strive to hold negotiations about the end of conflict with the West, the conflict in Ukraine. The desire to hold negotiations is laudable and positive. But who do we negotiate with? Our Western partners have defrauded us multiple times, deceived us about all the agreements that we have agreed with them. The Kiev regime is morally illegitimate and politically and even legally illegitimate. From the point of view of that failed state that exists there, how can you negotiate with them without delivering a complete defeat to them, and after achieving a full capitulation, and without a nuclear gun to our Western adversaries, so they don't make any moves then? would any agreement be fulfilled? Illegitimate and unreliable partners. How do you deal with them? Yes, it is so, as Joseph Stalin said, but I don't have anybody else for you. When he spoke about the writers in the USSR, when yet another time Beria came over and said that he's dissatisfied with Soviet writers, and Stalin said, I have no substitutes for you. And we'll need to achieve such agreements and such conditions that would be A, in line with our interests, and B, be reliable. You're quite right that it's very hard to agree with such people. They're always deceiving you. They say one thing and do another thing. That is quite sad. But all armed conflicts end with certain peace agreements. One of the leaders of major European countries said that such agreements can be based on a military defeat or a victory. Naturally, we will achieve a victory. That is clear. The matter of legitimacy of the status of those who we have to agree with. Yes, indeed, there are some issues because it seems that the incumbent authorities, if you take a quick look at the legislation of the Ukraine, it seems that the executive authorities of Ukraine have lost their legitimacy. Article 103 of the Ukrainian constitution states that the election is done for only 5 years, and Article 83 of the Ukrainian constitution says that during the martial law, the mandate of the Verkhovna Rada, the parliament, may be extended of the Verkhovna Rada. And nothing is said about the extension of the mandate of the president. Now, there is also a law about the martial law and the way it works. It is said that during the martial law, the elections of the presidential elections are not being held, but it is not said that they're extended. I've graduated from St. Petersburg University as a legal professional, and that is very important. If it is not mentioned in the law, it does not exist. The penal code has the relevant article about the usurpation of the power, and it seems that it is indeed the case. Still, you can negotiate, because I think that according with the Article 110 or 110 or 11 or 9, the mandate is transferred to the Speaker of the Verkhovna Rada, the Parliament. Therefore, if there is will, we can find someone to negotiate with. But I can repeat that only on those conditions that we have agreed on when we started those negotiations in Minsk and later in Istanbul, and not just some notions. So if we take as a basis those Istanbul agreements, we still need to proceed from the reality of today. That's just major brushstrokes. The idea that all wars end in negotiations, I think it's a false one. The majority of wars end in defeat and capitulation of the adversary. That's the only way to end this war. Moving on to the next question. The question that complete surrender of capitulation of the adversary. Currently, when the U.S. benefits from the war, and they will continue it, bringing the Ukrainians to the slaughter, now they move on later to the Europeans, and this war, without an accelerated movement up the nuclear deterrence staircase, cannot be stopped. Number two, there are tectonic gaps between tectonic plates right now. There will be many conflicts arising. That is an objective trend. Before, there used to be a nuclear fuse. It is not felt as much today, the fear of the nuclear weapons. Do we understand that we have a tremendous responsibility not only to win in the war, and for that we need to move up the nuclear deterrence escalation staircase much more rapidly, but also to bring back the nuclear fuse to the international system in order to prevent the tremendous new wave of conflicts.
Because who else can do that but us? Who else can do that but you? Incumbent upon you is a huge responsibility, and if we continue to crawl so slowly up the ladder, even though the movement is there, then I'm afraid you might sort of shirk that responsibility, even though I know it's a moral dilemma. Well, as far as nuclear escalation is concerned, we never were the ones to start this rhetoric. I do not remember who was that lady. It was the former UK Prime Minister. When she became the Prime Minister, she said she was willing to push the nuclear button. We never said we were. We only said that we have to treat this matter very seriously, and we did that. Everyone was accusing us of saber-rattling, using the nuclear weaponry. We were not doing that. Now, as far as the use or non-use of nuclear weapons is concerned, we've got the nuclear doctrine, which says it all. Just the day before yesterday, I spoke to the heads of news agencies, and I explained this to them. I said, we've got the nuclear doctrine, which says that we can only use the nuclear weapons in emergency cases when our sovereignty and territorial integrity are threatened. I do not think we're there. I see no need for that. But the nuclear doctrine is a living document, and we are carefully following what is currently happening across the world and around us, and we do not rule out the possibility of making amendments to the doctrine. Now, moving on to the nuclear tests. In the past, we signed the treaty and ratified it, whereas the US did sign the treaty but didn't ratify, so that's why we withdrew the ratification. If need be, we can conduct the nuclear tests, but so far there is no need for that because we've got the computers and the information systems that allow us to do that virtually. Now, you spoke about the speed, the outcomes. You said that incumbent upon me is great responsibility. That's true. Can we speed up the decision-making processes? Yes, we can. But it will accordingly bring up the possible losses, and that's why I take into account what the proposals from the General Staff are saying. Speed is important, but the most important thing is to care for the lives and for the safety of our guys who are fighting on the front lines. That is why the military are doing their work, starting from this beginning of this year. 47 settlements have been liberated, around 880 square kilometers. We are pushing the adversary from the territory of Donbass and the adjacent territories. The General Staff and the Ministry of Defense have the requisite plans for us to achieve all our plans, all the goals we have set forth, and I'm confident that all of these plans will be implemented. That said, we are fully aware that moving faster upwards the ladder of nuclear escalation can help save many lives, because it can make our adversaries come to their senses. Because, you know, they could otherwise take advantage of our nuclear doctrine, which is so conservative I'm hopeful that the amendments will be made to the nuclear doctrine which will allow you to respond with nuclear strikes to any strikes against our territory. This should be the sovereign right resting with our president. I do hope that such a norm will make it into the nuclear doctrine, which will have a sobering effect on our adversaries, and it will always also help save lives. Maybe it's too early to move along the nuclear escalation ladder, but still, it might be necessary to have a cool-down effect. They have gone mad, especially the Europeans. It's almost for the third time during the 100 years that they are trying to get into a war. The Americans are far more cautious. They're currently burning Ukrainians, pushing them forward, whereas the Europeans are trying to get ahead. Well, it's like a hunter, you know. It's how animals behave. If there is a herd of hyenas or wild dogs and you've got a stick, you can keep them at bay. And there's a chance that you can do that, but there's a high chance that they will tear your clothes, and if you get tired, they will bite you to death. If you can kill a couple of them, then they will disperse. You know, President Mnangagwa knows about the behavior of hyenas. Do you agree, Mr. President, this is how you deal with hyenas or wild dogs who attack you?
We do have lots of hyenas in Zimbabwe. But we keep them in the national parks so that they don't disturb us a lot. We have no problems with them, and they breed a lot, and if there is anybody who wants some, we are ready to donate.
Yeah.
I'm no hunter. Well, we've got hyenas of our own, yes, in Europe. Well, let me get on with the question. If we fail to move resolutely along the nuclear escalation ladder, won't we incur the wrath of the Almighty? Because the Almighty once showed us the way when, with fire and brimstone, Sodom and Gomorrah were razed to the ground due to their lawlessness and sinfulness. After that, humanity was trying to live the righteous life, but then they forgot about the old ways. So maybe we should make humanity come back to their senses, that part of humanity that has lost their faith in God and their reason. Well, maybe you can do it without me. Well, you'll bring out the heat. I think everyone has got scared already. Well, you've spoken about the Europeans. There can be different types of logic. But God forbid it should come to some kind of strike. Everyone needs to understand that we have the early warning system for missile attacks. The same system is something the US has. No one else has such a well-developed system. Europe has no such early warning system. So in that sense, they are more or less defenseless. Second, the power, the might of the strikes. Our tactical nukes are 3 or 4 times more powerful than the bombs the Americans used against Hiroshima and Nagasaki. 3 or 4 times. And as far as their number goes, we've got dozens of times more of those on the European continent. Even if the Americans were to bring theirs over to Europe from the US, we still have more. So God forbid it happens. I do hope it never happens. a sign of the cross for that, but you say it'll help save lives. But, you know, it might, on the contrary, lead to numberless losses. And, you know, if the Americans were to get involved in that exchange of strikes using their strategic weapons, well, I don't think they would get involved. And the Europeans have to think about that as well. But be that as it may, I am hopeful that it'll never come to that point. And there is no need on our part for that to happen, because our military are gaining experience, raising their efficiency. Our defense industry is performing admirably. I've spoken about that extensively. We have raised the production of munitions 20 times, which is many times as much as our adversary is capable of in terms of aircraft, in terms of armored vehicles, and so on and so forth. We're superior, so there is no need for us even to contemplate such a possibility. So please, I would like to address everyone. Do not mention such things idly.
Вы столь ответственно.
You are behaving very responsibly, and you're saying these responsible things, but the thing is, we are dealing with people who are totally irresponsible and who've lost their reason. Well, you are a scary person. Well, no, I'm not. You know, you are looking at these partners from afar, and I grew up in that system. I know them from young age. And I think I got grounds to say what I'm saying, even though I understand full well your hesitations. I understand it's a terrible choice which can only be made in dire circumstances. But if they know that you are not willing to go that far, then it'll never stop. They will always try to let our blood flow. And it's not just us they're fighting against. They're also fighting our friends in the world majority, because we are the bulwark of this world global majority. I do not know whether the presidents agree with that. Well, if you'll allow me, my decisions and the decisions of my colleagues I'm working with on these matters do not involve any hesitation. There is no room for hesitation, and there is none in reality. All of our decisions are based upon the objective and biased analysis of the current developments, and this is how we are moving forward. The day before yesterday, you spoke during the meeting with the heads of news agencies, and you said something very interesting. You said you were willing to provide your long-range weapons to countries that are adversaries of our adversaries. This made me very happy, because it's high time we did that. Are we going to provide precision-guided hypersonic weapon systems? Are we going to provide our technical specialists? Because that could improve the situation in the world significantly. Well, say there are aircraft carriers which are absolutely useless amid the current conditions. They will simply disappear, and people will stop spending and splurging so much money on aircraft carriers. What are we going to provide, when and how? Well, certainly, I'm fully cognizant that we shouldn't yet be doing that on our own. Or at least we shouldn't be saying that out loud. As far as aircraft carriers are concerned, you said they're useless. No, they're not. They are useless in a global conflict from the strategic point of view. But as far as geopolitical tasks are concerned, as a tool of geopolitics, to move them closer to territories where Americans or the French or the British want to fight or to force someone to do something, yes, carriers can be useful, especially. But of course, given the fact that China and Russia have at their disposal precision-guided hypersonic weapons, yes, the sense of aircraft carriers is disappearing. You say they shouldn't spend money on that, but let them spend money on aircraft carriers. Well, I'm addressing our friends in India and China. They are also spending money. Well, I said there might be some geopolitical rationale involved. Of course, they are no longer useful as strategic weapons, but they still have other uses. And as far as other countries are concerned, let them spend money on those aircraft carriers. Now, on to weapon supplies. We're not doing that yet, but we do reserve the right to do that, to provide weapons to countries or legal structures who are experiencing certain pressure, including military pressure, from the countries that are providing weapons to Ukraine, are calling for these weapons to be used against Russia and against the Russian territory. If they provide such weapons to the battlefield and if they call for these weapons to be used against us, why don't we have the right to mirror that, to act in kind and do the same? But I would go as far as to say that we're going to do that tomorrow, because any such supplies would involve a number of factors that in this or that way would have a bearing on certain regions of the world, and we have to give it a lot of thought. Well, wrapping up the military element, which is so unpleasant to talk about, I would like to say that if we do not follow fast along the nuclear escalation ladder, which I think is the way to go, to sober them up. Maybe we should then instead pursue the avenue of mobilization. Do you think we will be able to rout the adversary without mobilizing more people? Well, if we were to follow the recommendations coming from you, if we were to follow as fast as possible, if we were to go forward as fast as possible, then the current level of troops wouldn't be enough. But we are following a different rationale. We are pushing the adversary out of the regions that have to come under our control. And that means there is no need for us to have any mobilization, and we have no plans for that. The mobilization cycle we had when we called up to 300,000 people, it happened. But last year, without any mobilization, on a voluntary basis, our men, true patriots of the country, volunteered to the draft centers, and the number of those people stood at more than 300,000 people. Those who volunteered last year. This year, starting from the beginning of the year, the draft centers have seen an influx of more than 160,000 people. On a daily basis, there's another 1,000 volunteers coming to the draft centers and signing the contracts. We see what the Russian character is, what's the character, the spirit of a Russian citizen involves. When we fully understand that, when we see it, then we see that we do not have any need for nuclear weapons to achieve final victory. And I can add that we're currently witnessing the forceful mobilization in Ukraine. I am confident that they're going to bring down the draft age down. We have accurate data from the Ukrainian sources that the Americans are conditioning their support on this lowering of draft age to 23 years, to 21, maybe to 18 years, maybe in one go to 18 years, maybe gradually. Then the leadership of Ukraine is going to be replaced. This is something I spoke about before, but what's important, they're only drafting 30 or 50,000 people. Last month it was around 70,000 people, and there's going to be a lowering of that number. And it means everything they're drafting, everyone they're drafting is only going to be enough to replenish their losses. There's going to be a slight increase. You can have different types of calculations. I'm not going to cite the figures, even though we have those. But, you know, it's different in Russia. We've got volunteers who come of their own accord, of their own volition, to draft centers, and there is no need for mobilization.
Mr. President, I hear your arguments, but I also know the history of our country. And I remember 2016, when we were winning, but people got tired. So I do believe that at some point we will need to speed up. And back then, we managed to win in 2017. And now, thank God, we started a little later. We started the special military operation with a slight delay, but there is a major uprising of spirit among Russian people, and we see that the Russian economy is finally working properly, because this is how we operate. You take some time to get ready, but then we have all the right circumstances. The so-called fifth column has left the country, and there are only just true patriots staying in the country. But it should not still be lasting for too long, and I believe that please do not write off the idea and the arguments that myself and my friends are regularly presenting to you. Well, we're not writing off any ideas or any arguments. We do take them all into account. Thank you for your recommendations. And now I'd like to move over to the question. We're getting back to the agenda of the world economy, and this is the matter that you addressed earlier. So, both you and I have experienced communist ideology. So, this is probably not where we're willing to get back to. But nonetheless, a true great state cannot do without national ideology or a grand idea. And those states, those countries that were losing this national idea or national ideology would be inevitably falling apart, and the world could be considered a graveyard full of shadows of that kind of countries. And by the way, our country experienced it twice. First, we lost our belief in the Russian Tsar and our motherland, and second time when we lost our faith in communism. And now we are trying to oppose to introduction of a rigid state ideology. Clearly, the ideology could be shaped and phrased easily. You've done it yourself, partially in your speeches. Maybe that kind of ideology does not have to be mandatory, but maybe it has to be mandatory, at least for those people who want to be leaders of this country, who want to be elite of this country. This is a code of honor, and this code of honor could be written easily because we know it. And by the way, we are working on it. It is very close to the Confucius idea of an honorable man, and we've been discussing it with religious leaders, both from Orthodox Church and Muslim leaders. They all agree that this kind of code of honor could be created and written down. Not for everyone. If people want to lead ordinary lives, let them live. That's all right. But if you want to lead, if you want to succeed in the society, then you absolutely need to stick to clear rules, and those rules have to be made clear. I'm not going to name them just in order not to waste time. Those are pretty obvious, but I'm still wondering, while we are hiding away, there is no need to make amendments to the Constitution. Why not introduce a single state ideology that is mandatory for everyone who is willing and ready to serve the country and society? Well, we are not afraid of anything. We are not shying away. We are not afraid of anything. It's just that there is constitution that you mentioned yourself, and the constitution stated that there should be no ideology. We used to have a state ideology. You mentioned yourself at the time of the Soviet Union, but availability of that kind of dominating ideology didn't stop the Soviet Union from collapsing. So the idea that would unite a multinational country should be there, is needed. But you said it yourself that at first we lost our faith in the Tsar and our motherland, but later in communism. Well, we've lost our faith in the Russian Tsar, but we definitely haven't lost our faith in this country, in our motherland. It's just that those types of beliefs were different, and those were different assessments of what is good or what is bad for our motherland. And this is a different question. In this regard, we need ideas. As for our faith in communism, it was lost, but not by everyone. Otherwise, we would not be having the Communist Party of the Russian Federation. And it has a lot of supporters, that's a fact. And I believe we need to treat it with respect. But you're right in saying that we need ideas that would unite us. And that kind of uniting idea, and the events of today are showing it, could be the true patriotism, the true, genuine patriotism. And those people who voluntarily go to the front line, are ready to suffer their lives, their health, is the best confirmation of this fact. This is the actual, true patriotism. But you have to approach it in a very reasonable manner. You need to present it properly, reasonably, in a really beautiful manner. Please help us with that. That would be my pleasure. And I agree it has to be done. And I'd like to assure you that I remember the time when the communist ideology was dying out. I wasn't sorry about it, but because of the death of the communist ideology, that country back then died, and that is because vacuum emerged, and there must be no vacuum. We need to fill it with clear things. Give us an order and we will act on it. But then we need to present it to the society, to the elite, to make it more or less mandatory. And then it would work. By the way the communist ideology worked, that was mandatory for everyone. And for a very long time, for many years, there were many beautiful things about it, and it was helping our country to move forward. It helped us win in a horrendous, dramatic war. So we do need ideology. You know what? I suggest we do not go any deep into this discussion. We do not make it any more extreme. I'm happy to discuss it with you, but it's not just this communist ideology, although it played an important role in our victory in the Second World War. But if that would be the only thing uniting this multinational country, well, yeah, it could be. But then my question is, why would that be the case that people would be carrying icons on aircrafts above Moscow to give it protection? Why church was brought back to this country? Well, just as like we hear it today, out there in the battlefield, there are no soldiers who do not believe in God. And the same happened back then. Of course, ideology played a role. People were going to the front line for their motherland, for Stalin. But motherland would always come first. We must not forget about it. Certainly,
очень много стран развалилось, когда потеряли.
but many countries collapsed and ceased to exist once they lost their ideologies.
Еще один мирный хороший вопрос.
All right, one more
У нас в стране
pleasant,
идет большая
peaceful
дискуссия по
question.
миграции.
There is a massive discussion going on in our country on the matters of migration, as you know, and
В том числе проявляются шовинистические настроения.
there are some chauvinistic ideas in our society that are harmful for a country that is multinational at its core. But nonetheless, migrations authorities are basically a police authority. Whether that's good or bad is a different question, but the task of this authority is to limit migration. I believe it is important to be more rigid in limiting the negative aspects of migration, but I believe we are facing a task. This is not just a task, this is also an opportunity to start massively attracting highly skilled and qualified migrant workers from abroad. We expect the climate migration to happen. The price migration is happening already, and there will be a crisis migration. Those are people who are trying to escape crises. This is happening already. And by the way, we've just experienced a wave of interesting people who could have joined us from Afghanistan after the moment when they had to escape dramatically, when the United States made that happen. And I'm wondering, maybe it's time for us to modernize our concept of migration policy. I read it some time ago. It is exceptionally unrealistic and liberal, but at the same time, it looks like that the police authority is implementing it into reality. I'm wondering, maybe it is worth establishing a separate agency in the country that would be responsible for attracting migrants and developing the modern concept of migration policy. And by doing so, focusing on attraction of migrants and strictly limiting unwanted migrants. As of now, we do not have such a policy in place. Well, I have nothing to object to that. You're right. Although, as for the possibility of exciting people from Afghanistan coming to our country, well, we have to think about it. Right now, there is a number of exciting personalities coming from other countries to Russia. But you're right. You're right, that kind of reasonable, well-thought-through policy is not yet available. We used to have one agency for that, but it was later merged with the Ministry of Internal Affairs due to security reservations we've had. Whether this is a problem or not is a question. We are discussing it with our colleagues, and I set a goal to the Russian government and the Security Council. It is important to revisit this matter, and as soon as possible. We cannot pretend that the problem does not exist. It is there. This is the importance of engaging labor workers, migrant workers, with a virtually zero unemployment rate right now, and shortage of workers is an important limiting factor to the economic growth. And you're right in saying that it's not just that we need labor migrants, but we need people of a certain qualification and training with proper command of Russian language and understanding of Russian culture. And my colleagues will very well understand it, our colleagues from the countries where most of migrant workers are coming to Russia. And together we are discussing what is the best way to facilitate this work and how to train and educate those migrant workers in terms of the command of Russian language and being aware of the Russian legislation, so that the migrant workers are feeling comfortable, and most importantly, local population is not experiencing any difficulties, be that in the labor market or in their daily lives. Because where most migrant workers are settling is whenever there is economic life is happening. This is Moscow region, here in St. Petersburg, in some cities of Siberia where the salaries are higher. We definitely need to do a lot in this area. I fully agree with you. Well, I am willing to refer to the excellent experience of our colleagues in this regard, and I would like to address President Arce in this regard. You were sharing a lot of interesting information with us, and I'm sure that we are going to spread your speech more actively between Russian universities, because it is a wonderful speech that you could learn so much from it. This is basically an alternative to what is being taught in the majority of Russian universities up until now, and you're a living example to the fact that there is an alternative way, there is a better and a more effective economic policy. But my question is slightly different. Bolivia is not exactly a poor country, but you need to attract investment. And you have some plans of building a transcontinental channel. Do you believe you still may address the International Monetary Fund for this financing or the World Bank? Or is this time long past and maybe it takes some new instruments? What kind of instruments do you see for this purpose? We established the new development bank at BRICS. Maybe there are some other instruments. I'm just wondering which approach would be ideal from your point. You are an expert in economy. What is your vision of the ideal international economy that would help you develop independently? What should be developed in this regard?
Muchas gracias por la pregunta.
Thank you very much for this question.
Lo único que quiere es que el desarrollo esté basado
Generally
en el
speaking,
aprovechamiento de nuestros recursos naturales. En ese sentido,
Bolivia would like to develop using the natural resources and minerals we have, and Bolivia is open for foreign direct investment.
La mayor parte de la participación en la inversión extranjera
According to the model where the majority of foreign investment is coming to the area of natural resources and minerals.
donde están totalmente liberados, como sucede en varias economías del
And
planeta,
that is,
como
of
el
course,
turismo,
the
como la
realm of
industria,
SOEs in
inclusive la
Bolivia,
agricultura
but there are also some other
y otros
sectors
sectores donde
in
no
tourism,
están
agriculture,
en juego los recursos naturales
and
y pueden
others.
invertir cualquier inversión.
This is where natural resources are not that much involved, and in this regard, any foreign investor, provided that we are not talking about strategically important natural resources of our country, this is where the state has to have at least a 50% control stake. If we talk about lithium, we have conducted tenders, and more than 7 companies participated in the tender in order to engage in lithium production in Bolivia. 3 companies are working with us already. 2 of them are Chinese, 1 is Russian. And at the end of the last year, yet again, we have issued new invitations to the companies. And in August this year, the procedure is to be completed. We have largest reserves of lithium in the world, and there is enough space for many international companies and foreign companies to engage in exploration and development. We have certain investment in the mining industry, but obviously, production of lithium is probably the most important area for foreign investors. Apart from that, there are other opportunities for investments and for those who agree and consent to our economic model. And we, as a government, are willing to provide necessary conditions for sustainable development and good returns. And of course, BRICS and New Development Bank is a wonderful opportunity Because we are waiting for financing that wouldn't be the classical type of funding, as it happens with the IMF or World Bank, because they provide it on their own terms and they pursue their own goals, while regional associations in Latin America, this is the Regional Development Bank of Latin America, and some other associations and banking institutions in Latin America offering financing. Or let's say there is an association of 5 countries of the region where you may find better terms to get a loan, and taking into account available alternatives, namely the BRICS, New Development Bank, I would say this is a great opportunity to make sure that we can attract foreign investment and foreign investors to participate in that kind of investment projects. And our government is quite cautious in approaching the use of mineral resources. We are open for private direct investors to other industries.
President Mnangagwa, I also had a question for you, and a rather substantial one, I think. Right now, our government is preparing a program as a hosting country, program for the BRICS summit, where 3 African countries are about to participate, and I think there will be more to come. What kind of direction would you like BRICS to take? Where do you think BRICS should develop? What kind of institutions should be created by BRICS in order to help and possibly later engage such countries as Zimbabwe? Possibly a food foundation for BRICS, or mineral fertilizer of BRICS, or maybe emergency agency for BRICS. Right now, there is no such emergency management agency, and possibly our countries could pool their resources. It would not require any additional effort, I guess. So what would you like BRICS to do?
Thank you very much. Currently, Zimbabwe is going to host SADC, which is our regional body, in August this year. And to achieve that, we are building a new city, which we believe will be complete by the end of August and September, where we host SADC nations in Harare. With the BRICS countries, we currently do not, not aware of any intention to hold a BRICS summit in Zimbabwe. What I'm aware of is holding a SADC summit of heads of state in Zimbabwe. This rotates among SADC countries. We do so in order to first have every single member of SADC have the opportunity to host the SADC heads of state. But in that process, we create facilities, because it is necessary that when you're holding a summit of that nature, facility must be created. So Zimbabwe, currently we are busy 24 hours, we don't sleep. Create a new city where SADC heads of state are going to host SADC summit in August. After that, it means we are going to have facilities available for future international or regional conferences in Zimbabwe. We are not like the big boys who are here, who have facilities that have been established for a very long time. We are growing up, and I'm happy that we are likely to be able to achieve the standard required to host a regional conference. And it means that in future, even holding Zimbabwe-Russia summit could be held in Zimbabwe because we are creating such facilities. It is necessary, of course, for our region, or in fact, countries in Africa or members of the third world to make sure that they create conditions to promote summits to come into their jurisdiction, because that also brings technology. You cannot host a summit of this nature when you don't have communication equipment or the facilities requisite for such a summit. So we in our region are, in my view, standing up to the challenge to host not only regional summit but continental summits. We should be able to do so. I believe that in the future, for instance, now you have Russia Federation Africa Summit, you have China Africa Summit, you have Spain Africa Summit. I think in the future I should have Zimbabwe Russia Summit where we host the Russian Federation, or Zimbabwe China Summit where we host China in Zimbabwe. So we are conscious of that possibility. And what is critically important is to be focused. Yes, we need external support, but it is critically important that as a nation, we must also make sure that we develop primarily on the basis of domestic resources that are available, and only be supported in terms of where we feel we fall deficient. That way, we become focused and we become proud that we have created such institutions, such facilities. So I'm looking forward for a day when I hold a summit, Zimbabwe-Russia summit, and my brother will come and attend the summit in Zimbabwe with all the facilities that I see here. As I look at them, because when you build after you've seen what somebody has built, you build better. So we are likely to create better facilities, my dear brother, because I'm seeing what you are doing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, I'll address a letter to you with a request possibly for you to, so you could outline what do you expect from the BRICS summit specifically. Maybe you have some specific desires. That would be very interesting for us, because we gather such ideas and requests, because indeed BRICS is gaining ground and we need to find the right direction for its development. I'm being told that we need to wrap it up. I still have many more questions. Then I had a lot of interesting questions. You shouldn't be applauding that. Well, if so, then the last question goes to President Putin. You're a Russian European. You were born in St. Petersburg, a favorite city of many Russians, including me. The European trip is over. The European trip envisioned by Peter I. Now you're wrapping it up, with maybe a bit belatedly, but there is one problem here. The European genes are strong in us, and Europe became part of our DNA.
как их сохранить,
How do we preserve them?
не растерять по дороге,
How
как
not
это
to
мы
lose
делаем
them
очень
on the
часто
way, as
в
we often
России,
do in Russia,
когда выплескиваем с водой
when we
ребенка. Может быть, сделать
get
Петербург
rid of the good with the bad.
центром настоящей европейской
Maybe
культуры,
should we make
проводить
St.
здесь фестивали
Petersburg a true city
настоящих
of European
европейцев
culture to
и
hold
заявить, наконец, о том,
festivals for
что
true Europeans
мы
here,
Европа,
and to
мы,
finally
конечно,
state that
Северная
we are
Евразия,
Europe. Yes,
в
we're
первую очередь, и
Northern
цивилизация
Eurasia,
цивилизаций,
and we're a civilization
сделать
of civilizations. But still, maybe we should make St. Petersburg a center for European
и к этому
culture.
вопросу,
Now, that's question number one.
настоящей европейской культуры,
A
к
true
этому
European
вопросу
culture.
прилагается другой.
And now there is a
думаю,
follow-up
что наши,
segue question.
Друзья
I think that
из
our
Африки и
friends from
Латинской
Africa
Америки
and Latin America
обрадуются, если
would be happy
мы начнем превращать
if we
Петербург
start to turn
еще
St.
и
Petersburg also
в центр
into
мировой
the center
культуры.
of global
Был Париж,
culture. There used to be Paris,
потихонечку угасает.
now it's
Нью-Йорк
dwindling
стал
down.
не таким.
New
Может быть,
York
сделаем
is
Петербург
not the same.
центром
Should
мировой
we
культуры?
maybe make
Не
St.
ищите,
Petersburg the
здесь уже
center
всё
of
построено.
international
Здесь просто нужно
culture?
создать несколько
Nothing needs to be
фестивалей,
built here. We just
несколько,
need to hold several festivals and
извините за англицизм, хэппенингов,
several happenings
мероприятий, на которые
events
будет стекаться огромное
that would
количество
gather
народа.
a
Петербуржцам это
tremendous
будет
number
выгодно,
of people, and that will be beneficial to St. Petersburgers
и в
and
мировом большинстве.
everyone in the global majority as well. And in the Europe that we are leaving, it will be useful. May I?
Что касается возможной утраты
Now, as for the
элементов
possible loss of certain
европейской
elements of
культуры,
European
скажем,
culture
культуры
or
или генов
or
европейской
genes,
культуры
as,
в
as,
России
as
в
you
связи
mentioned,
с
the
тем,
genes
что
of
мы
European culture, due to the fact that we're
разворачиваемся в
turning
сторону Востока и в сторону
towards
Азии.
East and Asia.
Во-первых, мы не
First of all,
разворачиваемся в
we're
связи
not
с какими-то
turning
какими-то
around due to
по каким-то конъюнктурным
for some
соображениям сегодняшнего дня.
short-term notions of today.
Этот разворот происходит в мире
This
в целом.
turn is
В
happening
связи
around
с
the
ростом
world in general
новых центров
due to a
экономического
rise
развития.
of new
И
centers
мы
of economic
начали эту
development.
работу задолго
We have
до
started this
трагических
work long
событий
before the
сегодняшнего
tragic
дня на
events of
украинском
today
направлении.
in Ukraine.
Я уже говорил в самом начале. Вот сокращаются
I have said it
объемы
at the very beginning.
экономики и влияние на
The
экономику
economy
мировую,
is shrinking, and the impact on the
действовавшее
global
до сих пор
economy
в центре
is
мирового
shrinking
развития.
of the previously
Общий
standing
ВВП стран
economic
БРИКС
centers.
больше сегодня,
The overall
чем
GDP of BRICS
совокупный
countries
ВВП
is higher than
так называемой Большой
accumulated
Семерки.
GDP of the so-called G7.
И эти тенденции
And
не
these
только
trends
сохраняются, а
are not only
ускоряются,
present, but they're speeding up.
имея в виду темпы
They're
экономического
accelerating,
роста
I mean the
сегодня и на
economic
ближайшую перспективу.
growth for today
Это
and for the
неизбежные-
nearest future.
Неизбежное
This is
течение событий.
unavoidable,
С этим ничего не
the
поделать.
unavoidable
Никому.
phenomenon,
Вот чего бы ни
and nothing
произошло,
can be done about it.
эта
No one can do
эта
anything about
тенденция
it.
сохранится.
Whatever happens,
И,
this
конечно,
trend will continue.
Мы с вами только что это обсуждали. Петр прорубал
And just like
окно,
before, as we have discussed it, Peter I
здесь был центр
opened
экономического развития,
a window into Europe because this was the promise of the future, markets, technologies.
которые нужно было точать там,
He
и как
put
делали
some
это
boots
еще как пример.
as it was done in the Netherlands before.
Мы должны
It was an example,
отвечать
but
этому
the world is
вызову.
becoming
Мы так
more
и стараемся
diverse,
делать.
and we try to
Что
respond to
касается
that.
элементов европейской культуры,
As for the
не
elements
мы
of
его
European culture,
утрачиваем, не мы их
we're not
утрачиваем,
losing
элементы
them,
и гены
the elements
европейской
and
культуры.
the European genes and the
А
culture,
той части Европы,
but
которая называется
that part of
Западом,
Europe that is called
где
the
же эта
Western Europe,
европейская культура? Её
where is
скоро
that European
совсем не
culture?
останется. Останутся
It will
только
soon be gone.
памятники
It will be
архитектуры.
just
Но
architecturally
культура — это
monuments,
прежде
but the
всего
culture,
сознание людей.
first and foremost, is the
Оно отравляется
consciousness of
сегодняшними
people.
глобальными
Today it is being
либералистами,
poisoned by global
которые
liberalists.
во главу угла ставят не интересы
They are
своих собственных
prioritizing
народов,
not the
своего
interests of
культурного
their
кода,
own nations and their cultural code, national
какие-то
code,
оторванные от реальной
and some
действительности идеи,
notions
связанные с
far
глобальным
removed from
либерализмом.
reality, something
На мой
about
взгляд,
global
это
liberalism.
ключевая вещь. Мы
I think that
по
this is
определению,
key.
в известной степени,
By definition,
становимся
to a certain
центрами
extent, we are becoming
традиционной
a center of traditional European culture and traditional European values.
которые, если немножко посмотреть
And
вглубь
if we
истории,
think back and look into the history,
неверующих людей,
even for those who are non-believers, is first and foremost based
христианской
on
культуры.
the Christian culture.
Для
For us,
многоконфессиональной
for Russia,
страны,
with many religions,
вы сказали, не знаю, кто это,
I don't know
автор этих
who
слов,
was
что
the
это,
author of the words. You said that
прежде всего, военная машина
first and
русского
foremost,
народа.
this is the military machine for the Russian nation. Whoever said
Потому
it,
что
I don't
Россия
agree with that,
изначально
because
складывалась
initially Russia
как многоконфессиональное
was
государство.
coming together
Давайте
as a
вспомним
nation with
указания
multiple
той же
religions.
Екатерины и
Think
других
back
наших,
to the orders of Catherine the Great or
как сегодня бы сказали, руководителей.
other leaders, as they would have called them, czars and emperors. When they acquired new territories, they always told to respect the local population, their traditions and their beliefs. That's how Russia came together. Naturally, a major part of Russian culture is European culture,
Мы становимся носителями этой культуры.
and we
Она в
become
европейских странах убивает.
the carriers of that culture while it is being killed off in the European states.
Многие
Today,
европейцы стремятся
being aware of that, many Europeans
развиваться дальше именно на
try
базе
to develop
своих традиционных ценностей.
using their own
Получится ли
traditional
это или нет,
values.
мы
Whether they
посмотрим по
succeed or
результатам,
not,
выборов в Европейский
we will
парламент.
see
Но,
as the results of the
что
election to
точно
the European
нужно и
Parliament,
нужно
the EU
делать,
Parliament.
это, конечно, нужно
What-
развивать нашу
What
страну
needs to be
на
done
тех
is
исторических
to develop our country
традициях,
using
которые-
those
на которых
historical
она складывалась
traditions
как
of the
многонациональное и
past
многоконфессиональное
that brought it
государство.
together as a
Вы сказали о
multinational
роли
and multi-confessional
Петербурга,
state.
и я с этим согласен. Мы
You
так
spoke
и
about the
делаем, мы развиваем
role of
здесь,
St. Petersburg. It is
все эти
indeed what we're doing right
наши
now.
культурные активности по очень
All
многим
our
направлениям, в том
cultural
числе и
activities are being
с нашими
developed in many
друзьями,
dimensions,
партнерами
including
во
with
всем
our
мире,
friends
из
and
Европы,
partners
из
from
Азии,
around the
из
world,
Латинской
from
Америки, из Африки.
all
Вот
continents,
я
Latin
щас,
America,
вы
Africa,
сказали
Asia,
про
and so on.
Петербург.
You
Я
mentioned
смотрю на
St.
картинку
Petersburg, and
слева,
I'm looking at the
сбоку,
picture to the left, to the
справа.
right.
Вот смотрите, в центре
Look, in the center of this picture, well, to my right, is St. Isaac's Cathedral,
здание
even more to the right,
Сената,
Senate and Synod,
слева Адмиралтейство.
the
Это
Admiralty.
вид со стороны
This is the view
университета,
from
где
the
я учился,
university where I used to
со стороны
study,
12 коллегий.
from
Это
the
первое
12
правительство
colleges
России.
building, the first government of Russia.
Здесь правее дворец Меньшикова.
To the right, the Menshikov
С этой
Palace.
стороны
And
это
over
остров
here,
Васильевского острова.
this is the spit
Пасхальные
of
колонны,
St. Basil, of Basil's Island,
Исааки.
rostral
Это вид
columns,
со
St.
стороны
Isaac's Cathedral,
Эрмитажа.
the stock market. This is the
Если мы
view from the
переедем на эту
Hermitage.
сторону
But
и
if we
посмотрим
cross
обратно,
over and
то
look
есть
back
на здание 12
to the
коллегий,
12 colleges
на
building,
Эрмитаж,
or the
будет
Hermitage,
так же красиво.
it will be just as beautiful.
А почему?
Why?
А почему?
Why?
Потому что все это
Because
сделано
all of it
на основе
was built
важнейшего принципа
on the
и
most
закона,
important principle
который
and the law,
называется гармония.
which is called harmony.
Вот мы свою политику будем строить именно
And we will
на
build
этих
our
основаниях.
policy on this,
Гармонично.
on harmony.
Россия, безусловно, будет частью
And Russia,
этого
of course, will be a
многополярного,
part of this
гармоничного
multipolar,
мира.
harmonious world.
И, естественно, для нас естественно, что
It is quite natural for
в
us
значительной степени будем опираться и
that
на
will be
европейские начала, на европейскую
following
культуру,
to a major extent
носителями
the
является
European
именно
culture,
русский народ.
because
Не меньшим
the
уважением
Russian
будем
nation is
относиться
part
и
of that, but
к
will
культуре и
treat
традициям
with the same
других
respect
народов
culture
Российской
and
Федерации.
traditions of
В
other
этом единстве
nations of
наша
the
сила.
Russian Federation, and we're powerful through this unity.
Спасибо. Спасибо большое.
Thank you very much.
Спасибо большое.
Thank you.
Дорогие друзья, коллеги, это
Thank
было
you.
очень интересное, яркое,
Colleagues, friends, this was a very
интеллектуальное и
interesting
политическое
intellectual
событие.
and political event.
Я надеюсь, что наша аудитория
And
была
I hope that
интересна.
it was interesting for our audience.
Спасибо,
Thank you very much, Mr.
Я
President.
хочу поблагодарить
I would like to
наших
thank
гостей
our
и
guests
нашего ведущего.
and our moderator.
Спасибо
Thank you.
большое.